What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Young Rich Podcast. Today, I am joined once again by my boy Seth. Say what's up to the people, Seth.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Yep, and today we've been lagging. We've had some personal things going on, so this last week and a half we've only put out one episode, but we will definitely be more consistent going forward. I'll also be taking more pride in being active on my second channel as well, where I post shorter videos. But here we are today. So we got a lot to discuss. We're going to be discussing a couple things that have already been discussed, a couple of hot topics today at minicamp. But to start off today, I mean, this is hot news yesterday. Jordan Love is sitting out of training camp. Right, he was requesting a new contract. He wants a Joe Burrow like contract. He wants a lot of guaranteed money. Obviously, he took that 2-year extension last year, that team friendly deal, which was kind of a prove it extension for Jordan Love. I mean, but listen, Jordan Love won himself a playoff game. He is, in my eyes, one of the best young quarterbacks that we've had in the league. To come out like that, your first year as a complete starter, you make the playoffs, you win a playoff game, and you come very close to upsetting the NFC champions in the San Francisco 49ers. A couple lackluster mistakes late in that game, but I mean, this team completely blew out their expectations. One of the youngest teams to win a playoff game this year, other than the Houston Texans, right? You go out here in the last 10 games of Jordan Love's career, including the playoffs. I mean, 69% completion percentage, passing yards, 2,600 passing yards, 23-3 TD to INT ratio, and a 112 passer rating, which ranks among the third best in the league, right? And to pair him alongside a guy like Matt LaFleur, right? I mean, this is just a match made in heaven, right? You hit on a third straight quarterback in Green Bay, and to me, I mean, this is a no-brainer deal, right? You have the cap space. You're not paying anybody no crazy money other than Jair Alexander, right? This is a perfect situation to do it. This is the guy that has proven so much, right? He took basically the exact same roster Aaron Rodgers struggled to provide with at the end of his career, and took him to the playoffs. They won a playoff game, and he is now regarded as the second best quarterback in his division and one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC. So to me, this is a no-brainer with someone as talented as Jordan Love. A lot of people have compared his game to Aaron Rodgers. You sit behind him for 3 years, 4 years, and you learn so much just visually, all these mental reps of watching someone like Aaron Rodgers dominate the way he did, and to learn behind someone like that at when he was there, Aaron Rodgers was still at his MVP form. He learned behind Devontae Adams. He learned from them. He got this young receiving core to buy in, and this was a team that a lot of people early in the year, they said that they were calling out the receiving core. They said the receiving core was no good. They said this defense had issues. They said the quarterback, Jordan Love, was not playing well. So there was a lot of questions on this team, and the way they answered that second half of the season, losing 2 games, that whole last 10 games in the season last year, and then being one, drive away from the NFC Championship game as that guy of a young QB. To me, it's a no-brainer. Whatever you want to pay him, you want to pay him $50 million a year. You're putting him in that top 5 quarterback range, which to me, it makes sense. Jared Goff, he's got that friendly contract at 52.5. Tua is a guy that's also been in discussions. Do you want to wait for Tua to get paid and then pay Jordan Love, which I think can hurt Green Bay, because Tua, you've heard him and Dak both be in that $60 million, record-breaking range, right? So if you could definitely get him for 55, around that Burrow, Trevor Lawrence money. Obviously, Joe Burrow being at 55 kind of helps you not go more past 55, but Trevor Lawrence also being at 55 kind of, only had one great year, one great second half of football. And so, what are your thoughts on this move?
I think they just need to pay the man. I mean, they have the roster now to where if they get to the playoffs, they can be really competitive. And what they did to Dallas in the playoffs last year was just awesome to watch. Obviously, I mean, my dad's a Dallas Cowboys fan, and it's always funny just seeing the Cowboys in the playoffs just utterly tank. But I mean, like that offense ran through him, and just the dynamic of that offense and how they dropped so many points against Dallas. And that Dallas defense isn't bad at all. They've got Micah Parsons. They've got
Deron Bland.
Teron Bland, yeah, they have Stephon Gilmore too. Like it's a decent defense. It's not like it was a pushover defense too, and they dropped like near 40 on him. So I mean, like,
and it was at
they
home.
Need to pay. Yeah, and they need to pay him. Like they need to pay him. It's getting harder and harder to find like a quarterback to put up stats like that and just to be consistent. Especially like a huge thing with a lot of the bigger quarterbacks nowadays is once they make the playoffs, can they actually win? And so Jordan Love, I mean, first year actually like starting, they're being their starter, and first time actually getting into the playoffs, they win their first game. So he already kind of showed that, I don't think their roster last season was built to kind of go deep into the playoffs at all.
No.
I don't think their roster still is there to be to go too deep into the playoffs, but I can definitely see them winning one, even two games in the playoffs this year, and kind of like pushing forward to where I think they'll need a superstar receiver in their receiver
right.
core. Yeah, they need a couple of more guys to kind of edge out that defense, which is looking pretty scary though. They've got Kenny Clark, obviously they have Jairi. They just signed Xavier McKinney to a really big contract.
I like that pickup.
Yeah, and they've got Quay Walker, who's an absolute menace in the middle of the field, and then Rashawn Gary too, who I like out of Michigan. But they've also got like other guys like Kingsley Anagbar, who's pretty underrated, and then their first round pick last year, Lucas Van Ness too, who's going to be developing. But yeah, I think they need to put another superstar piece next to Jordan Love, whether that be a tight end or a receiver. They brought in Josh Jacobs, which I think is nice. He's going to fit right in. He'll replace Aaron Jones's touches on the ground, and he's going to get the yards on the ground. I don't think he's a better receiver than Aaron Jones out of the backfield, but I definitely think he's a better runner than Aaron Jones.
Yeah, he's underrated out the backfield. Like, I promise you get him the ball out the backfield, he can make a guy miss. He's definitely developed that aspect of his game, because obviously every running back in the NFL has to at this point, with how fast
yeah.
he is.
And so, I mean, going forward, I just think they need to pay Jordan. I feel like you were saying, they can't wait until Tua gets paid, because when Tua gets paid an obscene amount of money, money that I don't think he deserves, it's going to put the Packers in a tough spot, and they're just not going to like it. And if they want to build around Jordan, a huge part of it is securing the young guys that you have as stars when they're young and getting them to a sizable contract, but not one that's going to put you at a cap deficit or that's going to kill you in the future. Just like how the Niners can build so much around Brock Purdy because his contract is so dirt cheap.
700,000.
Yeah, so something like that. I mean, and like the receiving core for the Packers is just so young. I mean, all of them have shown flashes. Like Christian Watson obviously has shown flashes. If he can stay healthy, Romeo Doubs too, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, even Bo Melton. They're five deep there, where they're like pretty decent. But the problem is they're all young and so inconsistent. And then there's always injury concerns with them too. Same thing with their tight end, Luke Musgrave. He's super young. I'm pretty sure he was a rookie last year. So everyone is literally so young on that team, including Jordan, that hopefully I want them to bring in kind of like a veteran on that offense, whether it's in the receiving core or maybe a tight end or something like that. But I mean, the O-line's kind of shaping up to look pretty good. I know they have Elgton Jenkins, who I really, really love on that offensive line. But yeah, I mean, they're going to be a really exciting team to watch, and I can see them making maybe a surprise run in the playoffs. And I definitely think they need to lock up Jordan for a while.
Yeah, and like you were talking about the weapons aspect of it, because like you said, that being Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, people that were, for the first half of the season, were getting criticized on lackluster production, not being great receivers. But obviously you've seen it kind of, they figured it out at the end of the year. And I think a lot of that was due to Jordan Love being so great, and Matt LaFleur offensively getting his guys right and putting them in positions to succeed. But I 100% agree. I do think you could definitely add a veteran receiving piece out there, just to help. Another guy who's like a clear-cut number one who could also help the young guys learn, and it could just benefit everyone in the end. But I do think Josh Jacobs still has a lot left in the tank. I know a lot of people are low on him after the season he had last year, which I'm going to blame a lot of that on Josh McDaniels and the scheme he was trying to run. It just was not the same style of football that had so much success for Josh Jacobs the year prior. But again, I do think that pairing is going to work out just phenomenally well. I am very high on Josh Jacobs out the backfield, being a receiving back, which not a lot of people respect that game of him. I think he's come a very long way from his rookie year into the league. And I just think his hard-nosed running, in the energy and passion that he plays with is just something that you love to have, especially at a position like running back. Obviously, you finally paid Josh Jacobs a lot of money, something that he's been looking for. He didn't get it done with the Raiders, and he wanted to be a lifelong Raider, but it didn't work out. So you made him happy, and now I expect him to go into a full offseason healthy, happy that he finally got paid the money he deserves, and in a young offense that just won a playoff game. You went to a better situation. So what better way to go than upgrading from Aiden O'Connell to Jordan Love? So yeah. But another one of the biggest topics of discussion in the NFL world, obviously you've heard it go over. This is his second time requesting a trade, but it is Brandon Aiyuk, right? Brandon Aiyuk is currently at minicamp, but he did request a trade. And from what I've been hearing and reading on social media and in listening to Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, is that Brandon Aiyuk has not had any movements on negotiation trade talks since last May. So it's been months without any actual sit downs and let's discuss the money you should pay me, or let's work out a contract, things like that. So, this is definitely, listen, the Niners still have him for another 2 years if you pick up that 5th year option as well. So, he's kind of in a very bad position. And then at the end of that, you could still franchise tag him and all these different things, right? So, there's a lot of, Brandon Aiyuk does not have a lot of leverage here, right? Even though as great of a player he is, hopefully a team comes out and offers some draft capital or some compensation in some way or another to make Brandon Aiyuk happy and get him out of there. But when I think about Brandon Aiyuk, I think he's one of the best route runners in the league, right? I think his presence on the Niners will be missed if you decide to move off him. Obviously, again, like I just said, it's in the predicament he's in. It's just very hard to trade Brandon Aiyuk if you're the Niners because of how good he is, because of how high you think of him, but the money situation, right? He's seeing all these guys, all these receivers that he's arguably better than getting paid, getting their their financial security, and he's not a part of that discussion. He just had a All-Pro year this year, right? Second team All-Pro this year, was averaged 15 yards per catch. Just absolutely dominated this year, and his pairing alongside Debo is going to be missed. Just so the lack of Debo route running that Brandon Aiyuk makes up, I just think it's going to be something that's just kind of irreplaceable, right? And you hear a lot of people say Brandon Aiyuk benefits from the Kyle Shanahan system, but I think Brandon Aiyuk elevates this system, right? His ability not to be guarded one-on-one, right? It allows George Kittle to get it going, allows Deebo Samuel to get less people in the box to get going. Christian McCaffrey benefits from having a dominant guy out there who can win one-on-one, who can win in the red zone, and do all these different things. And to me, an ideal destination for Brandon Aiyuk is, for me, I want to see him go to a team that has a young quarterback on a rookie contract, okay, to where you have the ability to get paid, right? A team that could be willing to give up some sort of draft compensation to get you and bring you over here, right? And to me, the first thing that comes to mind is obviously New England, right? You pair him with a quarterback like Drake May, who they have no receivers in New England, right? This is going to be an absolutely terrible year for the New England Patriots. Drake May to me, is in a Bryce Young type situation where you got some pieces on that defense to keep some of these games competitive. But you have no help on offense this whole year, right? It's going to be you versus everybody. Brandon Aiyuk is clearly not happy, right? If you believe in Drake May, you took him as the third overall pick, excuse me. So you can go out here, you can make this trade, you can pay him the money, you have the cap space, and you can go out there and you can succeed, right? You can give a true top 10 wide receiver and give your quarterback a trill shot, right? Obviously, you still got to build a lot in that area, right? But you also put him in a winning culture to where if you hit on the QB, you could, really turn this team into a playoff team just like that. A couple good offensive pieces, and boom, now you're right in the mix in that weaker AFC West East that it's been this past couple years. And then another situation that I just think he would absolutely thrive in is going back to Washington, going to the Commanders, not back to Washington, but going to pair up with his college teammate Jaden Daniels, right? Going to Washington, you're going to pair yourself up with Terry McLaurin, who's under my eyes one of the most underappreciated receivers in football. You still have Jahan Dotson. You just signed Austin Eckler, right? You got Dan Quinn to lock in that defense, right? He's a defensive-minded coach. He's supposed to come in there and help that defense. And Jaden Daniels, right? Listen, I think he's going to have the best rookie year for a quarterback this year, and that just has a lot to do with his ability to throw the ball on time. Obviously he did play with Malik Neighbors and Brian Stewart Brian Thomas. But so he did play with a great team over there in LSU. But again, if you pair Brandon Aiyuk with Jaden Daniels and Jaden Daniels' ability to run the football, I mean, this offense can look very, very scary. Possibly a dark horse playoff contender if everything goes right. So those are the two destinations that I would really love to see him go into, because not only is he going to get paid, he's going to be happy, but he's going to be an immediate impact, right? You're going to see him take a crazy volume level leap, right? And his numbers, I expect them to skyrocket. So again, those are the two young quarterbacks that I see just working out perfectly for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like my takes on Brandon Aiyuk are kind of a lot different than a lot of people's. For me, if I was the Niners, one, I wouldn't trade him. I also wouldn't give him a new contract. I'd pick up his option and then I'd franchise tag him. I know Brandon Aiyuk would probably get so annoyed by that. But honestly, like if I'm the 49ers, I'm thinking to myself, I'm surrounding this guy with 4 other options on offense. I'm creating, if they're not double teaming Brandon Aiyuk, they're double teaming Kittle in the box, or they're double teaming Deebo Samuel, or they're focusing the run on CMC. He literally has the perfect situation where he can literally eat on the outside whenever he gets a one-on-one. And they have a quarterback that can get him the ball. Obviously, Brock Purdy proved that he can get him the ball. Obviously, he just set a career high in receiving yards and yards per reception last year. They literally made the Super Bowl. And if I made the Super Bowl with a team like that and I have all the same pieces coming into the next season, am I really going to be a prima donna and ask for a trade and beg for a trade and act like the 49ers hate me? No, I'm not. I'm going to kind of suck it up and be like, if I don't have any leverage in this situation, right? I want to get paid, sure. But I mean, like that's kind of out of like that's out of my control. And like the whole thing too, the huge part is that as a team that made the Super Bowl, coming into training camp, the last thing you want is drama circulating around, or like anything taking away attention from like anything else, just the team, just the team focus on winning and getting back to the playoffs and getting back to the Super Bowl. And the whole thing too, I saw this play out with the whole Le'Veon Bell saga and the Antonio Brown saga too. That's like the whole Le'Veon Bell saga and the sitting out and refusing to play during the actual season because he didn't get a contract, and then going to the Jets and then getting a contract, and then his career just absolutely just like plummeting, and then him being an absolute nobody who boxes in his free time now. I mean, like I really feel like I don't know. I was a fan of Aiyuk. I feel like the whole diva situation with a lot of the guys who just don't get paid and don't get their contracts. It's just a I don't like the situations that they put their teams in. And for me, I mean, I love Aiyuk. I think he's an absolute dog. But I mean, they drafted
Ricky Parshall,
a guy out of Florida. Yes,
Ricky Parshall.
I'm a huge fan of him. He's nasty, dude. That guy is nasty. And I mean, I'm the Niners, if he does well this season, I see the Niners trading Aiyuk. I feel like the Niners, like, they literally made the Super Bowl last year. Why would they trade away a key piece of their offense? You know what I mean? Like all of these like news media outlets and everything, like Aiyuk wants out, the Niners are going to trade him, blah, blah, blah. Like all this noise, all this buzz that always happens around. If I'm an NFL GM and I just made the Super Bowl and Aiyuk's literally my number 1 receiver, am I thinking in the back of my head, I'm going to get a first-round pick or a second-round pick for Aiyuk, I'm going to trade him somewhere else? No, I'm thinking, no, he's staying on the team and he can play during the season and we're going to go and try to win a Super Bowl. Like I'm not thinking about trading my number 1 receiver when my team is so competitive right now and I don't have to pay my freaking QB yet. Because once I have to pay my QB an obscene amount of money because he just produces like he produces, even if it's just the offense or whatever, when I have to pay him, right? I mean, paying CMC 100% for, dude. There's not another running back in the world that can do what CMC.
But that's the issue though, is that he's, listen, I understand the whole prima donna thing. Like I hate that too, right? You go out here, you're on a very successful team, you're on a winning team, right? But he has sat here asking to get paid, right? And you've seen Kittle get paid, Aiyuk get paid, CMC get paid again. You just got an extension. Jawan Jennings just got an extension. You're extending all these pieces. You're extending all these guys, re-signing all these players, and it's just, to my eyes, like I'm just I'm hurt because I'm your number one receiving option on your team. Like you said, we just went to the Super Bowl. I was a second team All Pro, and I'm not getting any sort of offer thrown my way. It's not the fact that there is, because again, 100% you're right. He knows that he has no leverage. That's why he's at minicamp, because he knows. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, like, you're sitting here watching all these guys get paid, other receivers that you are better than, and the fact that they haven't even discussed a contract negotiation with you since May, it's just, to me, it's a bit disrespectful. Like, it just, you feel underappreciated because Amon-Ra St. Brown, a great example, All Pro, 1,500 yards, boom, just got paid a fat contract, you know. And you're seeing other Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, guys who aren't better than Brandon Aiyuk, or debatable, whatever you want to say, but you know, Brandon Aiyuk put up better years than these guys, and they're getting paid almost $30 million a year. So to me, it's just a bit disrespectful when you say you have no money to pay me, and then you just upped CMC's salary. And again, 100%, CMC, if at this pace, could go down as a Hall of Famer, one of the best running backs we've ever seen, right? So I get it. He is so important to that team. But, you know, it's a bit spit to the face, bit disrespectful.
Yeah, and for me, I think, honestly, if I'm the Niners, this is what I'm thinking. So you have what they're eventually going to do. Depends on if they win a Super Bowl or not this year, whatever, we'll see. But Deebo Samuel's contract ends in 2025, after the 2025 season. That's probably after the 2025 or 2026 season. That's when their control of Aiyuk is also going to go up. Now, if I'm the Niners, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait it out, and I'm just going to play the game of like choosing between, if I need one of them to leave, if one of them has to leave, is it going to be Deebo or is it going to be Aiyuk? Personally, I'd rather have Aiyuk than Deebo. I love Deebo. I 100%. Think he's like, you know, he's like the gadget guy or whatever. He has huge games and whatever like that. But he is not the same Deebo Samuel that we saw not last year, but the year before. Where he just had got paid. Insane season. And I think the Niners knew that going into it. And like when he got paid. But I mean, like
he got paid. That's another situation with Aiyuk, is he got paid after year 2. They won the Super Bowl. Rookie year was okay, whatever. And then year 2 is when he had that All-Pro year. And then that's exactly when he got paid that offseason. That's when he was throwing the fits. That's when he was throwing the pouts, not wanting to talk to people anywhere. He was just being a diva, trying to get paid. He got paid. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, the rest is history. And he's been underperforming in my eyes for what he got paid.
Yeah. And so I think if I'm the Niners, I'm just waiting it out. We'll see what happens during this season. Personally, if I'm the Niners, the first thing I would do is obviously lock down CMC, which they did, and then pick between Deebo and Aiyuk, and hoping that Ricky produces this season. And then you have another guy. And then obviously Kittle, you got tight end locked down for a while. They're completely fine there. But then they've got a ton of pieces on that defense too, where like, when do they need to get paid? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many guys on the Niners where like they're getting all these guys, and like they're stacking up their team so much just because they haven't had to pay Brock Purdy yet. And once the time comes around when they do have to pay Brock, everything is going to change. Bosa, Warner, they're not going to be able to keep Hufanga. They're not going to be able to keep Bosa, Warner, Kittle, Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, and CMC. All those guys, those 7 guys with Brock Purdy, they're not going to be able to keep all those guys on the same team.
100%.
So the thing is, the big question surrounding the Niners and Brandon Aiyuk's contract, when he's going to get paid or if he's going to get traded, it's going to be when Brock Purdy gets paid. And how they do this year. I really feel like, because if they win the Super Bowl this year, I can see them trading Aiyuk and then being like, okay, now we're going to reassess the whole situation. If they lose, if they make it deep into the playoffs again and then lose, it's going to be another one of those bitter tastes in your mouth where you're like, we want to try again. We want to do it again next season. And then that's when it's going to be a whole thing of, well, we want to keep Aiyuk again. And then, yeah, so we'll see. But I mean, I just feel like the tension probably at training camp, it's probably a little bit of an awkward situation there. With Aiyuk there now, and kind of like just the media frenzy around it. But I'm excited for the Niners. I really hope they do well. I really, really hope they do well.
I don't. I hope they shit the bed. I hope that, I swear to God, I hope Brock Purdy. I hope they pay Brock Purdy a lot of money, and then they're stuck at mid for the rest of their life, for the rest of the 10-year with Brock Purdy. And I wish the same thing on Tua as well. I hope they pay Tua $60 million a year, and then they can't pay anybody else. They can't bring back Jalen Waddle. They can't bring back any of these guys. And then boom, all of a sudden, because that's a lot of money. Think about that. If Tua got paid 60, then you have Ramsey, who's already getting paid what, 20 a year. Tyreek is 30 million a year, and he wants an increase. He wants a pay increase. Waddle's almost 30 a year. He's 28 and a half. Like, that's a.
He's having another child, so he needs some more money.
Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, it's
crazy.
crazy.
Stat where is like for every 800 receiving yards he has one kid.
I did see that too.
He's like up to his like 12th kid now. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and he's oh my god! I watched him on Hard Knocks last year with the Dolphins. It was crazy because he was always talking about he was such a family man, and then all you hear is about all you hear though is like all you see is the reports on social media about him having like 5-6 different baby mamas. So it's it's insane.
I haven't watched Hard Knocks in a minute, but I'm definitely going to watch it this season because they have the AFC North Hard Knocks that they're going to have like mid-season, and I think that's going to be hyped to watch because obviously the Steelers are finally going to be on it, and then like just the AFC North in general is just a doghouse, so that'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, I've been watching the episodes coming out about the Giants, which a new episode dropped tonight, but the offseason, it's been pretty insane, to be honest, some of the ins and outs of just being a GM and running a team, because there was also this one scene, which is kind of why we talked about the Saquon Barkley situation, but was that the GM basically told Saquon, you go find a deal that you like, you come back and let me know if you want it. Kind of like kicked him to the curb and said, you come back when you find a price that you're worth, and we'll see if we can meet you there. And then, anyways, the owner came in and said, yo, listen, we got to work on outbidding the Philadelphia Eagles. We don't want him to go there, blah, 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 this and that. And then he just kind of disrespected him, and he said, I will be so hurt if I have to wake up on Sundays and watch Saquon Barkley be playing in the Philadelphia Eagles uniform. And then next day, Saquon goes out, the information breaks, he's signing to Philadelphia. And he actually took less money than he would have if he stayed in New York. So it was just some crazy things to see how players are treated and stuff like that. But, they were receiving a lot of hate and backlash in situations like that.
I also think too, I know they talked about Xavier McKinney too, and like losing Xavier McKinney because that was a big piece of their defense, and how they were kind of shocked at the contract that he got because he's now the second highest paid safety in the NFL, I think just behind Minka. But I feel like they don't realize that like free agency, if a team has a need and there's a guy that fits that need and he's even above average or whatever, obviously with like just the inflation of being paid at each position, every year there's always a new highest paid. Right.
It's
going to keep going like that. And they don't realize that they can't judge based off of old contracts, because obviously now that Xavier McKinney signed that contract and he's the second highest paid safety in the NFL, imagine when Minka's contract comes back, or when a guy like Derwin James' contract, when Derwin has to get re-signed, or Talanoa Hufanga, or like, guys like that who are like obviously better than Xavier McKinney, which Xavier McKinney is pretty solid. But like when those guys' contract come up and they need to get paid, they're going to get paid a lot more than him. You know what I mean? Yeah. So they need to, it was funny because like the guy it was kind of like a very like sarcastic, monotonous tone of when he was looking at the contract of Xavier McKinney, and he's like, wow, that makes him like the second highest paid safety in the league. And it kind of like, it was the tone of like, I don't think he deserves that kind of pay. I don't think he's the second highest paid. He should be the second highest paid safety in the league. But yeah, you could definitely see like that kind of like negative, pessimistic kind of like aura around that, which I mean, you need to believe in your guys, man. Like that was kind of just like a turnoff for me when I was watching that too, when I watched that little clip. But it shows just the atmosphere of that whole Giants like
organization
and like organization in general. Yeah. If they don't want to pay their guys, if they don't want to believe in their guys, someone else will pay them for them.
Yeah, and especially like you're talking about free agency, everybody talked about it. You're worth your market. So if you're going to a free agency where there's no left tackles on the market and you're a B+, B-, then you're going to get overpaid because you're the only one there. Everybody needs that position, and the demand is there, so you're going to get paid a little bit more money. And just like, Kirk Cousins, Atlanta needed a quarterback so much, so now he's getting paid $45 million a year, and it just happens all the time. You know what I'm saying? People will take off Jesse Bates, for example. Although he was an all-pro in Cincinnati, he went out and got completely overpaid by Atlanta to make him one of the highest paid safeties. I think the highest paid safety in the NFL at that current moment, because
he absolutely balled out last year.
Yeah, and he was great, but you just couldn't.
Insane.
Cincinnati couldn't offer him the money Atlanta had offered him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it would have never happened.
One of the rare moments where overpaying actually, like, he actually paid for his stock. Because if I paid Jesse Bates the amount of money that Atlanta did, knowing that he'd have this season that he had last season, I would 100% pay it again. Like, I'd pay it
Yeah.
every single day and Sunday. Like, he had like over 130 tackles, 6 interceptions, and one of them was like a pick six, and he was an all pro. So I mean, like, it's insane. Like, I was honestly shocked, like, just watching, like, being a Steeler fan and knowing that, like, Jesse Bates is pretty decent, just watching him go absolutely insane for the Falcons and get his first Pro Bowl. Like, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's just I'm very high on Jesse Bates as well. So when I seen that, I was just happy for him. You know, you got paid, you got the money you're worth, and then you overachieved. You did better than what you just put out. And to see something like that actually pay off for a team is, like you said, great to know that my investment was worth it. You know. But the next topic of discussion is obviously going to be Ceedee Lamb, right? Ceedee Lamb will not be at minicamp today. He will request a trade if a contract is not met, right? And when you talk about Ceedee Lamb, you know, you put him in the discussion of Justin Jefferson. Does he want 35 mil? Does he want, you know, where he rank in those ranges of paid receivers? And from what I've heard from the sources I've read is that his contract needs to be at least $30 million. He's asking for the bare minimum at his position of where he's at. He's okay being the 5th highest paid receiver at $30 million, which puts him next to Tyreek Hill and St. Brown, and just above Jalen Waddle, which I think if you can get him for $30 million, it's a no-brainer, right? It's not like, and I know a lot of people were criticizing Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys for not paying him sooner. You know, you let Justin Jefferson set the market for the best receiver in football, right? Does he, you know, after having a better year than Justin Jefferson, because Jefferson obviously had injuries and poor quarterback play, like, you know, does he want to ask for more? Does he want to break the market again? Does he want to go 35.5, you know? And to see someone like Ceedee Lamb, for me, you know, I kind of thought it was there was going to be some drama there. You know, he was obviously has missed all the OTAs and missed all these scheduled events this offseason due to the fact he wants to get paid. So I thought it was a little bit of I understand the situation, right? But I hate when people miss mandatory things. But is he worth the investment? 100%. If you're getting him at $30 million, you're getting him at the 5th highest paid receiver. I think this is a no-brainer extension, right? He was arguably my favorite receiver in that draft class when he came out with Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, right? Like, that was my favorite guy coming out the draft. He's a high volume guy. He needs his touches to get going, and that's exactly what he did. An all-pro year this year, 1,600 yards this year or 1,700 yards this year, had an absolutely remarkable year, right? You're getting in a situation, if you're Dallas, right, where you have to pay somebody, right? You've already decided at this current moment, you're not going to pay Dak Prescott. And if you continue to wait, you're clearly going to make Ceedee Lamb unhappy. And another team would more than likely go out here and pay a receiver like this. You know, a team like the New York Giants, who need a top dog receiver, can pair him alongside Malik Neighbors, right? Give Daniel Jones a true fighting shot. Like, there's a lot of teams where you could find your way, some sort of reasoning that they should bring in Ceedee Lamb. And if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, right, I'm off the Dak Prescott wagon, right? I understand you're going to be in dead cap hit these next year, right, with how much you've restructured his contract and moved money around, but I am off the Dak Prescott wagon. This is the last year of Dak Prescott in Dallas unless he wins a Super Bowl, right? But at this current moment, you have to pay somebody. You should either, whether you pay Michael Parsons, you pay Ceedee Lamb, pay Dak Prescott, you have to pay somebody. At this moment, you're setting yourself up for everyone to be unhappy, because if you pay Dak Prescott and then you don't pay Ceedee Lamb's obviously going to want to be traded, right? So, and then if Ceedee Lamb and Dak Prescott get paid and you can't pay Micah once he wants to get paid, then you're going to have some problems there. So the Dallas Cowboys have just dug themselves in such a deep hole, and I understand you can't pay all these guys top dollar. You can't pay Dak Prescott $60 million, Ceedee Lamb 35, and Micah Parsons 35 to 40, whatever he's requesting in that market, right? He wants to be the highest paid defensive player, so we will see. But you're just putting yourself in a very deep hole. This roster is already very, very slim as it is. You've had to move off of a lot of key pieces this year due to the incapability of re-signing them. You're putting yourself in a bad position. The Philadelphia Eagles have absolutely, fixed their situation. Their roster situation defensively. They got 2 first-round caliber cornerbacks added to the defense. They just brought in Saquon Barkley. They re-signed their key core receivers. They are locked into competing and winning a Super Bowl. And for you to be in this bad of a situation financially, and now CeeDee Lamb is unhappy. It's just a lot of bad energy going on for the Dallas Cowboys this year, and it just looks like the Dallas Cowboys malfunctioning and about to have a shitty year just due to self error, their own error, not paying guys when they should have been paid, not taking care of players sooner rather than later, and they've just put themselves in a very, very tough financial position.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if I'm the Cowboys, a superstar receiver like CeeDee Lamb does not come around very often. Like, I feel like, sure, we weigh out, like, the importance of positions on a team, and quarterback is obviously the number one position. But really, if I'm the Cowboys, it all depends on how they're doing mid-season before the trade deadline. But obviously, like, even just like exploring like what you can get for Dak in a trade before the deadline. I mean, like, if you're not doing well, really, if Dak's not doing well, I'm trading off Dak before the deadline, and I'm not letting him walk away without getting something in return. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, even if they can get like a second, or because obviously they're not going to have any leverage, obviously, because if they're not thinking about paying Dak, right? People won't know if they're going to pay Dak or not, because that doesn't come until the offseason, right? But if they're kind of shopping him around, maybe teams will think that, hey, they're not going to pay Dak. They're going to pay Ceedee. They signed Ceedee. They're not going to pay Dak, and so we're not going to give them what we think Dak Prescott should field, right, just because there's no leverage there. But honestly, if I'm the Cowboys, I 100% re-sign CeeDee Lamb, because you don't get a superstar receiver like that. He's also still so young. You can find a quarterback to get him the ball. And that's kind of the whole thing too that's going to go on in Minnesota with JJ McCarthy. Signing Justin Jefferson and keeping him and prioritizing him, not re-signing Kirk Cousins. And then they brought in JJ McCarthy, and hopefully JJ McCarthy can get Justin Jefferson the ball. So I think that the Cowboys should adopt kind of a similar approach to the CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, where how the Vikings kind of approach the Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins thing. You kind of see what the season does and kind of how the season takes you through up until like the deadline, maybe a few weeks before the deadline, if you have a bye week or whatever. I don't know the Cowboys schedule. And you kind of just field offers. Maybe you just check in sort of, but to have a quarterback like Dak is obviously, I mean, they have him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And I mean, teams are going to want a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, no matter who it is, you know what I mean? And it would give me like a really bad taste in my mouth if I'm the Cowboys, if I just let Dak walk away in free agency and I don't get anything from him. That's just the huge problem there. But yeah, I don't think, I think it obviously, a lot of these takes depend on what happens during the season, but I don't think they should give Dak the money. Because if I'm being honest, I'd rather keep Micah and Ceedee over Dak, and then one of the other two, because I just think the other two are at positions where it's really hard to find a game changer and a caliber of their caliber, basically.
Right.
Yeah, at those positions, it's a lot harder to find, and so you keep those guys when you find them.
Especially because just the way CeeDee Lamb plays, it's like, yes, Dak Prescott does a good job getting him the ball, but Mike McCarthy does a great job of just getting him the ball. He's like a better, well-rounded version of A.J. Brown, or even a DK Metcalf-like guy, where you just get him the ball and he'll do the rest. He's a high-volume guy, which solves the issue of trying to get him the ball, right? Because he's going to demand the ball. That's how he gets going, yards after catch. And he's capable of running routes, right? So let's not disrespect him in that aspect. But he's a guy who you can kind of draw up plays for, just get him the ball and let him make some things happen. So worrying about having to pay a guy $60 million a year to get him the ball, I think if for whatever reason, like you said, they trade off Dak Prescott, or he gets injured, or whatever goes wrong with Dak Prescott this year, trying out Trey Lance or Cooper Rush, or just anybody, that just to see how it goes. Because there was like one point in time where Cooper Rush went out there, won 3 games, and all of a sudden everyone was calling for Dak Prescott's head, So there's a lot of things to take into account. I think the way CeeDee Lamb plays, you could kind of fit him with a lot of QBs, especially younger QBs, because you're basically just getting him the ball, right? And then if you rebuild that running back room, you invest in a running back and give a young quarterback someone to hand the ball off to, because you have some solid weapons here. Even Jake Ferguson is a solid tight end, and Listen, this team, they could make it work, and I think Dallas. I mean, everybody wants to play in Dallas. You can get a guy on a friendlier contract, or if you want, go trade up and get one. Invest a lot into the quarterback of the future. So again, I think Ceedee Lamb can kind of play with any quarterback, and the numbers will still be the same. I think because again, he's that talented, and just the way he plays, his physical presence, his physical dominance with getting the ball in his hands and making things happen after the catch is just better. He's one of one. Okay, in that category. But the next topic of discussion, obviously, I did want to react to the top 10 quarterbacks, NFL, ESPN rankings, right? And they put these out, I believe, last Thursday. And I wanted to go over them. We'll go over them. I'll call out all 10, and we'll just go from there. Number one, going into 2024 to the 2025 season, 2024 season, Patrick Mahomes at 1. You have Joe Burrow at 2, Josh Allen at 3, Lamar Jackson at 4, Matthew Stafford at 5, Justin Herbert at 6, CJ Stroud at 7, Aaron Rodgers at 8, Jared Goff at 9, Dak Prescott at 10. Is there any names out there that stand out to you? Like they're too high, too low, didn't make the list?
I'd say there's 3 names in there where I think they're too high. The 3 that I would say are too high are Josh Allen, for one. I think he's extremely overrated. Matt Stafford. I feel like, no, Matt Stafford's pretty solid. Number 5 in the whole NFL. I don't know. That just strikes me wrong. I don't think a 40-year-old Matt Stafford, basically however old he is, I don't think he's, he has some really good pieces on that offense. I don't think, if we're talking about quarterback, I don't think he's top 5. I'd rather have Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, Jared Goff, and Aaron Rodgers. The Aaron Rodgers one's kind of going to strike a lot of people wrong. My whole basis around that, and we can talk about it, is Aaron Rodgers hasn't had a legitimate season since 2021. The last time he actually played a full season, he only threw for like 3,600 yards, and he had double-digit interceptions.
So you're saying he shouldn't be at 8?
I don't think he should be at 8.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. That's one place where we get. Me personally, because again, like you said, right, the last time we seen him play a full season was with Green Bay, that same team that Jordan Love took to the playoffs and won a playoff game with. He was unable to even make the playoffs, right? They had a losing record. But me personally, I would have Jared Goff at 8. Because of what he's done for Detroit and that franchise. One bad half of football away, a couple drops that go your way, you're sitting in the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? For the Detroit Lions. Who would have ever thought in this lifetime we would have said that? Dak Prescott at 9, because regardless of what you say about him in big games, he still can guarantee you double-digit wins. And then I would have Trevor Lawrence at 10. Because again, before he got injured last year, I mean, he was 8-3, number 2 team in the AFC. They were sitting atop atop the NFL in power rankings week by week, and you didn't get the best version of Trevor Lawrence, but you were still just managing to win games, right? So to me, Trevor Lawrence is a respectable place for him. 10, it's not pushing nothing too crazy. Aaron Rodgers to me is just not the same Aaron Rodgers that we have anymore. Tua Tagovailoa not making the list. I think this is 100% acceptable. I think I've said this since I've watched Tua play football. He is not an NFL caliber, a winning quarterback in the NFL, right? There's so many deficiencies to his game that hurts his team, not winning in the cold, not winning big games. In that week of a division, you had some games where you struggled against the Jets, right? So it's a lot of stuff to discuss. And then Justin Herbert and Matthew Stafford, I think you can kind of switch them out however you want to put that, right? Justin Herbert at 5, I'm okay with it. I see the talent in Justin Herbert. The thing to me is that Justin Herbert and I don't know if it's the head coach, I don't know if it was Dan Staley, I don't even know if that was his name, but Staley was his last name for sure. But they just lost like the big games, games that they needed to win, crucial games. He just came out in the second half and did not perform, right? And again, I see the talent. Everybody does. He plays quarterback the right way. His numbers are remarkable. They're great, right? He's played with some great weapons. Hardball coming through, I think, is going to elevate his game. But again, I just am missing that winning quarterback feature that you see from a lot of these guys. Even CJ Stroud, so early in his career, I've seen 40-second game-winning drives, when it's asked from him. I've seen him go down in the fourth quarter late in games and go out there and perform. Matthew Stafford, again, another guy who I trust to go out there and perform. It just so sucked they ran into the Detroit Lions first round, right? Which we seen how good Detroit really was. Josh Allen at 3, I think that is a good spot for him. Me personally, I think Josh Allen's postseason success puts him over Lamar Jackson, and the fact that you can trust Josh Allen to throw the ball, right? And he's still got that, not the same dual threat ability, but he can still run the ball and get you some touchdowns, Cam Newton-esque and Joe Burrow at 2, I think this is, again, I've said this since he's came into the league. I think Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in football, the only guy to go into Arrowhead and win games on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs, something that nobody else has been able to do. His unfortunate attribute is that he can't stay healthy, right? If Joe Burrow stays healthy, we're looking at a lot of things differently. And even when Mahomes won their first Super Bowl against the Eagles, they were one roughing the passer penalty away from going back to the Super Bowl, right? So Joe Burrow is well respected at 2. CJ Stroud at 7, I don't have no problems with because he's young. You got to see it again. You want to see some sort of consistency. I wouldn't even be mad if people argued Jordan Love at 10, based on what he did last year, the last 10 games. But yeah, I think this list, that's how I see it.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I feel like there's 3 guys that I would add to this list that I could probably switch out for Dak, Goff, and Aaron Rodgers.
I'm here.
And maybe even Matt Stafford. I'm just not that high on Matt Stafford. The 3 guys that kind of pop out to me that I think I would consider putting on the list is Jalen Hurts for 1, Jordan Love, and then Brock Purdy, just solely based on his production. So for me, I'd have Mahomes at 1, obviously. I'd probably put Burrow 2. I would put Lamar over Josh Allen, specifically just because Josh Allen's turnovers are just always such a huge problem. I've seen him a lot of the bigger games that they've won, he has kind of he's put up the passing yards numbers, but his defense is there for him. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills have had a great defense, just his whole career. They're just one of those teams where they're always going to have a good defense. But I mean, he has more interceptions than he has games played this year. He loses a lot of fumbles, obviously, from his his scrambling and stuff like that. But I mean, he kind of pooped the bed against the Chiefs. He became very, very, he just resorted to running on the ground. He ran for over 70 yards and a couple touchdowns on the ground, but he didn't even pass for over 200 yards. You know what I mean? And I feel like in a few big games last year, I remember that against the Dolphins and I believe it was against the Chargers too. I just remember watching him and kind of thinking the rushing is there, which is a huge aspect of his game. He's just huge, man. He's going to get the quarterback sneaks, the design QB run plays in the red zone and things like that. But I mean, against the Dolphins, I saw him absolutely he was driving the ball down the field. He got I'm guessing over 340 yards passing, right? He had a couple touchdowns, but he also had a couple costly, really bad interceptions too. And with just the way he plays, just the gunslinger kind of archetype that he is, and just kind of going in there and flinging it. They only scored 20 points that game. And thankfully, they scored 21 points. Thankfully, they scored 21 points, but thankfully, the defense held them to 14. Same thing against the Chargers, right? He only throws for 220 yards, 230 yards passing, and he has a touchdown and another really, really bad interception that I watched. And they only score 22 points, 24 points, something like that. And then the Chargers are held to the lower 20s points, and they win by 2 or 3 points. So I feel like a lot of Josh Allen's game is just too risky for me to put him over Lamar. I feel like Lamar, I mean, he also has the run game in his kind of stash. But I mean, that Ravens offense, Lamar's he's not as big of a liability, I think, as Josh Allen, because I've seen Josh Allen literally sell games himself just with the turnovers. And I feel like Lamar is he's more consistent. He's more safer when it comes to that. And he can still provide you with those huge plays too, that Josh Allen kind of has sometimes. The only thing that Josh Allen, I think, really has on Lamar is the ability to throw it literally 60 yards downfield on the fly, which is incredibly ridiculous. But Yeah, that's just why I would have Lamar over Josh, and then after that,
Would you? I'm gonna cut you off. I'm sorry for cutting you off, but
yeah,
would you rather have Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson in the playoffs? Let's
yeah.
be
If I'm
real
talking
here. Let's be
playoffs,
real here. Let's be real
I'd
here.
rather have Josh Allen in the
Thank you.
playoffs.
Thank you.
Yes.
Because
If we're
listen,
talking
because
about that, yeah,
I
I would rather
understand.
have Josh Allen in the playoffs.
I understand everybody wants to rank all these guys based solely on regular season production, but like,
Mhm.
listen, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football year in and year out, right? Why? Because of what he does in the postseason. Joe Burrow is second on this list. Why? Because what he does in the postseason, what he's shown in the postseason and against good teams. Josh Allen, regardless of his, Brett Favre-ish nature, where he's just got a gunslinger, right? Makes some bad decisions sometimes, but he's gonna be there. You can rely on him to help you win a playoff game. It's not gonna be pretty, but he's going to be there for you. And I wouldn't say he's gonna sell you a playoff game. Has he blown? Like I've been drooling over him after some of the playoffs games I've seen him play these last couple of years. No, but he's definitely not as bad as Lamar's been. Like Lamar Jackson's worst games to me were in the playoffs. Like I still think about it to this day. They should have beaten the Chiefs. They should have ran the ball like they did all year and won the game, right? But instead, they forced Lamar Jackson to throw the ball 35 times a game, which is something he's just not comfortable with doing. So to me, that's like the last taste of Lamar Jackson I have.
Yeah. And then to round out my top 10, I mean, personally, I'm going to put Mahomes at 1, Burrow at 2, Lamar at 3, Allen at 4. I'm going to put Stroud at 5. I have Herbert at 6. This is kind of where some people aren't going to like me a little bit. Purdy at 7. 8, I have Hurts. 8, I have Hurts. 9, I have Jordan Love. 10, I have Stafford. I'm just a real big fan of Brock Purdy, as you can tell. I'm high on the Niners. I'm high on Brock Purdy. I feel like, I mean, a lot of like we talked in the first episode we did, we're kind of never going to be able to judge Brock Purdy off of just like how dynamic that offense is and how many weapons he has. I don't think the Niners are going to let him leave and go somewhere else and kind of like him have the ability to kind of prove himself like Tom Brady did when he left the Patriots. I don't see that happening. I think the Niners keep him for a really long time. And we'll see though, like once they have to choose between the weapons, once he loses like one or two of the guys out of like, that offense, whether it's Aiyuk or Deebo Samuel, then see how he performs after that. But yeah, I mean, I'm really high on Brock Purdy. I feel like a lot of like when I'm watching Brock Purdy, like really just sitting down and watching a Niner game, I'm seeing him just like every time he drops back in the pocket and getting it over the middle of the field, he just throws it to the open guys. He doesn't make many mistakes. And when he does make mistakes, if you go back and look at all of his interceptions and the bad plays that he made and things like that, like actually going back like that Christmas Ravens game, looking back at those passes that he threw and the 4 interceptions, and you look at those and you tell yourself, is this Brock Purdy's fault on this play?
Two of them were like that. Two of them were like that. Two of them were like that.
Okay.
Two of them were
I also agree. I also agree that 2 of them were Brock Purdy's fault, but I also think that like when it rained, it poured in that game for the Niners. Like it was just like bad. And like there was just bad luck that game. And I feel like if you just there was just a few games last year where Brock Purdy didn't play the greatest, right? And I mean, a quarterback does that like here now and again and everything like that. But I mean, being just the type of quarterback he is, like the caliber coming out of Iowa State or wherever he came out of, being the last pick in the draft. And, I guess I'm kind of buying into the whole, like his storyline buzz, Mr. Irrelevant thing. But what he's done in the playoffs, I mean, it's pretty astounding how well he's done in the playoffs for a guy who's so young. And also just like, even we can say like he has all these great receivers around him and things like that, right? If he threw only 1 interception the whole playoffs, the 3 games that they played, that include like the divisional, the NFC championship, and the Super Bowl, right? I mean, that's only 1 turnover is pretty crazy. And he had like over 60% completion percentage.
Here's my thing. Because listen, because this is, I get it. Like we all see it. I see what he is, right? I think he's a more athletic version of Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And he is better than Jimmy G. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna come on here and say he's not better than Jimmy G. But we've seen Jimmy G come into the same offense, this exact same team, almost damn near identical, and have so much success with this team. He took them to a Super Bowl. They were at the NFC Championship when he was a starting quarterback, and then he got hurt. And then Brock Purdy comes in. Like they were already on that trajectory, right? And again, I give Purdy credit for jumping into a situation where it was Super Bowl or bust and performing performing, just doing the bare minimum, getting the ball to your players, boom. But Jimmy G came in this exact same offense with this exact same coach, this exact same defense, and people were calling him a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback. There was true discussions that Jimmy G was an elite quarterback in the NFL when he was a part of the San Francisco 49ers, right? And then as soon as he left, everything went to shit. You know what I'm saying? And you've seen how effective Kyle Shanahan is and his whole system, right? So it's just so hard for me to rank somebody that high when, in my eyes, I could put 2 or 3 players on that exact same team and you would have close to, if not better success.
Yeah, and the thing is, we wouldn't know. And the whole thing is too, imagine what if the Niners won that game? It didn't go into overtime. What if they won?
You would still have the same questions though. You would still have the same questions though. You would still have the same.
Because if Purdy would have won that game, right? He has a ring. He has a ring. He has more rings than Herbert. He has more rings than Burrow. He has more rings than Jalen Hurts. He has more rings than Josh Allen. He has more rings than all these guys that we're talking about, right? And it's kind of obviously we can play the what if game and stuff like that. But if he comes in, if he makes another Super Bowl, if they go deep in the playoffs again, when is it going to be kind of just giving him credit? Because I feel so much hate is thrown on Brock Purdy, and he's just one of those guys where he doesn't talk. He just takes it. He's quiet. He'll go and he'll play the Philadelphia Eagles and play Jalen Hurts and drop 300 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, and they win the game by 30 points.
Their secondary was god-awful last year. Let's be real. The Philadelphia Eagles secondary was god-awful. It was bottom 30 in the NFL last year. It was terrible, right? It was garbage. Let's not act like it was good. Let's not act like it was good. Garbage. Darius Slay was the only reliable corner last year, right? Everybody else on that team was garbage. Bradbury, garbage, right? But listen, when you surround yourself with 6 or 7 all-pro players on your offense, and then on defense you have almost double that, it is just so hard to go out here and give a quarterback credit because you just have so many things to worry about as a defense. It's so.
So then my question is to you. So my question is to you, what do you think Purdy has to do? Purdy
has to do it without that roster. Purdy has to do it without that roster. When he gets paid, and listen, he doesn't even have to win a Super Bowl. I'm not saying he has to win a Super Bowl with a worse roster, but he has to perform with a worse roster. You can't go into a team like that and everybody around you are regarded as top 5 in their position at one point, and you're saying that he's not benefiting from that. If you pay him $50 million, $55 million, whatever, and you lose maybe 4 or 5 of those key pieces, and he goes out there and gives you the same numbers, I'll show some more respect because the team's not as good. But to me, you have to go in there when there's absolutely nobody. What made Tom Brady so great was that he had nobody. He was winning games with Kenbrell Tompkins, with no Gronk, no Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman, regarded as a great receiver, a New England legend, but he was never regarded as a top 5 receiver in the league, a top 10 receiver. I think the one year he was a top 10 receiver in the league, he made a Pro Bowl, right? And that was the year they beat the Rams in the Super Bowl, right? He was Super Bowl MVP, okay? So, and then Patrick Mahomes this year, you won a Super Bowl with one of the worst offenses you've ever had in your career, right? You didn't have no real deep threat. You had a lot of inconsistencies early on. So to me, it's just because even I'm not crazy high on Jalen Hurts. When everybody was calling him MVP last year early on in the season, I saw it, but I didn't think he was playing his best football. But I still think you just have to go out there and when this team had this much success with a guy named Jimmy Garoppolo, that's where I draw a red flag. I'm like, whoa, we've seen Jimmy G leave and what he looked like. You know what I'm saying? So it's just hard to sit here and imagine that same success is gonna happen. And even with Jalen Hurts' case in Philadelphia, they had success with Carson Wentz, who was a different head coach at the time, right? They moved on to another head coach, different quarterback, boom. So him going into that, it was kind of like he worked his way into that starting role, into that superstar player that you've seen him turn into. So to me, it's just, again, 100,000%, it's all hypotheticals. You can't say what ifs. I mean, you could talk about them all day, but you can't truly go out there and prove a what if. But it's all about what if, with him, without that type of a roster, going to another team possibly, winning a Super Bowl without Deebo Samuel, without Christian McCaffrey, something like that to really make me go, wow, this guy did it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get you. I get you 100%.
Yeah. So I just like, and it's no disrespect to Brock Purdy. I just can't give it to myself to rank him higher than some of these guys who are doing it with lesser players, lesser talent. To me, that's what makes a quarterback great. Joe Burrow went out here and made it to the Super Bowl with one of the worst offensive lines in football, right? He got sacked 7 times in the Super Bowl. That was something special to look at because he got sacked 7 times in the Super Bowl and he was still one play away from winning a Super Bowl, against the Rams. So it's again, a lot of hypotheticals, a lot of what ifs, a lot of situations not panning out and stuff like that. But getting into the next topic of discussion, I did want to also go over the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL made this. ESPN did this as well. Top 10 wide receiver poll. I'm going to run through them quickly. Number 1, Justin Jefferson. No arguments there. Number 2, Tyreek Hill. However you look at him, no arguments there. 3, Jamar Chase. 4, Ceedee Lamb. 5, Devontae Adams. 6, AJ Brown. 7, Amon-Ra St. Brown. 8, Mike Evans. 9, Stephon Diggs. And 10, Brandon Aiyuk. Honorable mentions, you got Debo, Cooper Kupp, and Garrett Wilson, and Jalen Waddle. What are your thoughts on that top 10 right there?
I'm gonna say, I mean, I like it. I'd rather have Ceedee Lamb over Jamar Chase. The first thing.
I think so too.
I'd put Ceedee Lamb over Jamar Chase. I feel like also I'm glad Mike Evans made that list.
So do I. He is so underappreciated, dude. So underappreciated.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of guys too that aren't on the list. Was DJ Moore on that list?
He was not.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the guys. Was Puka on the list as well?
He was an honorable mention.
Okay, he was an honorable mention. Okay, so those two guys, I feel like I'll tell you my top 10. My top 10 is Jefferson, Hill, and then it goes CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra, and then I have Devontae, and then I have Mike Evans, and then I have DJ Moore, and then Puka. And then I have Diggs left off. I have Aiyuk left off, and I have Deebo Samuel. Obviously, is another one that.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs after the last 2 years, I'm the same way. I'm okay if he's off the top 10. To be honest with you,
yeah.
If you put him at 10, whatever.
I feel like the only one that's kind of like iffy on my list for me is having Devontae Adams at 7.
Yeah,
I feel like he should
come on, bro.
Show some respect. 7.
He should be top. Devontae Adams is top 5, regardless of what you want to say. He should. Yeah. Devontae Adams is a top 5 receiver because again, I say this all the time. Consistency is everything, right? You have to consistently do it for a couple years. You can't be a one-hit wonder, right? Which is why, in my eyes, Amon-Ra St. Brown being at 7 is okay. I would personally put AJ Brown at 5, Devontae at 4, CeeDee at 3, and Jamar Chase around that 6 to 8 range. Just because the fact Jamar Chase had a year where he was dealing with injuries. He had another year where he was dealing with Joe Burrow having injuries, right? And he hasn't has the same production as he did his rookie year, right? So there's just question marks. I want to see him get back to where he was, obviously healthy offseason and things like that. Mike Evans at 8, I think this is well deserved. Why he hasn't been in the top 10 before, I have no idea, but he's been one of the most consistent receivers in the NFL. Yards per catch, he's ranking top 5, and he's just an absolute great receiver. Keeping off the Garrett Wilsons, Devontae Smith, Amari Coopers, even DJ Moore doesn't bother me at all, just because, again, those are kind of guys. Amari Cooper is well respected, but I don't think he's a top 10 receiver. DJ Moore, again, another guy that was like, you knew his potential, but 1 year of truly dominating. So I want to see another year of some sort of success. But Amon-Ra St. Brown at 7 works for me. Brandon Aiyuk at 10. And again, Brandon Aiyuk could also be at 9. Stephon Diggs for me is on that 10, right? Brink 10, about to drop out the top 10. If I had to move somebody up in that list, that's just such a tough conversation, to be honest. I would have to move DJ Moore up, like if I had a choice, or Puka Nacua, one of the two, to get in that conversation. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's kind of, receivers is so tough because, it's kind of what you like in a receiver. You know what I'm saying? So.
For me, I feel like one of the most underrated guys, if I'm being honest, on this list that I love is DJ Moore. When he was on the Panthers, he's been in the league since 2018. When he was on the Panthers, he had 3 1,000-yard seasons for the Panthers. And then in 2022 and in 2020, when he had his career high before this last year, they had Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback. So, if you look at DJ Moore and the quarterbacks that he's had over his career, he hasn't had literally anybody impressive at all whatsoever. Maybe Cam Newton at the end and maybe Cam Newton at the kind of like towards the end of his career. I don't know if he was there in 2018. But I mean, when he put up 1,300 yards last season, right? Look at Justin Fields' passing stats. Justin Fields threw for 2,600 yards. Tyson Baggett, whatever his last name is, he's not great, but he threw for 800, right? So the Bears threw for like 3,400 ish yards as a team, and 1,300 of those came from DJ Moore himself, which to me is pretty insane because they didn't have a run game outside of Justin Fields.
They had a run game. Let's not disrespect. I mean, they're not like big names, but they were able to run the ball with anybody. Herbert.
I feel like it was more. I feel like if I'm a defense and I was preparing for a Bears game last season, it's keep Justin Fields in the pocket, cover DJ Moore on the outside, and you win the game. You know what I mean? And DJ Moore still put up a couple of like insane games. I remember watching him like drop like over 200 something yards in one game.
I think I was against the Commanders, where he had like 180 in the first half, in the first half or first quarter, some shit. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. But
so that's the reason why I have him at 9 on my list, and then putting Puka at 10 over Aiyuk and Diggs. I mean, I don't think we really need to debate on Diggs. I just think he's kind of like, I hope he does well for the Texans because the Texans are going to be exciting to watch, and he has CJ Stroud. But and then leaving Aiyuk, kind of picking Nakua over Aiyuk really is just the main reason for me is that the Rams did so well last season, despite like Cooper Kupp being hurt literally the whole season and being like completely out. So literally all the weight fell on. It didn't even fall on Puka's shoulders. I don't think anyone thought Puka was going to be anything like close to Cooper Kupp level esh. They kind of just like after Cooper was kind of like, oh, I'm hurt, he wasn't really producing and whatever, and he's out for most of the season. They kind of like thought their season was kind of scrapped, right? But then you get Puka Nacua absolutely going insane, breaking like all the rookie receiving records and all that, and then like absolutely balling out with Matt Stafford. Even when Matt Stafford was hurt, he was hurt a couple of games last year. He still balled out. That even opened up the run game for Kyren Williams, who became an absolute menace to society, bro. Like just popped off. And then so I feel like Puka did more for that offense at that time than Brandon Aiyuk did for the Niners offense. And that's the reason why I have Puka 1 over Aiyuk. That's really where it comes down to. I feel like Puka was more valuable to that offense and the numbers that he put up than Aiyuk was to the Niners.
Yeah, I mean that's 100%. I agree with you on that take. You can go either way. But talking about importance of 100%. I mean, when Cooper Kupp went down, me personally, I was like, oh, here we go. Because, these guys are about to be god-awful again. And then, like you said, here comes Puka Nacua breaking rookie records. Here comes Kyren Williams being phenomenal. And then Matthew Stafford playing quality football. And then, they start off the year a little slow, got Cooper Kupp back. I am actually excited for Puka Nacua to be paired alongside Cooper Kupp for a full healthy offseason. I think they can just get the better of each other. And when you have, again, you paid Cooper Kupp, you have a good, talented receiver that's on a rookie contract, 5th round pick, I think this could be great. And then you added Blake Corum alongside Kyren Williams, a 1-2 punch that you kind of didn't have last year. And I think this team could be very, very scary. Got a lot of young talent on this team.
Yeah, we'll see how their defense kind of holds up. Their defense is going to need kind of like an identity after losing Aaron Donald, so we'll see how that kind of shapes up. But I know they picked up Tre'Davious White, which I think was a huge pickup for their secondary. Tre'Davious White was regarded, I mean, before he got hurt,
twice.
He got hurt like a couple of times. Yeah, twice. He was like I think at that point, he was like a top 5 corner in the NFL back in 2019,
he was elite.
2020 era when he had like 6 interceptions and he made the All-Pro first team. So they're getting a guy like that. Obviously, he's coming off a couple of major injuries and, he's older now. So we'll see. But I mean, if he even shows up like maybe a third of how he was when he was an All-Pro, that's still like a great addition to their secondary to go along with, I mean, their draft pick, Jared Verse. And then they also drafted Brandon Fiske, I think, was one of their draft picks too, kind of like to replace Aaron Donald. But yeah, we'll see where the Rams go. I'm really excited for the season to come up. I know my favorite player on the Rams is Kevin Dotson, their right guard. He played really, really well for them last season. He was a Steeler. he was a devoted Steeler. He was a Steelers fan, and then he got drafted to the Steelers, and his dad's a big Steelers fan and everything. And the Steelers kind of gave up on him during the whole Matt Canada saga and Matt Canada's kind of identity he had on offense or whatever. And then Kevin Dotson shows up on the Rams, and then the Rams offense gets elevated, and Kevin Dotson's considered elite now, and he almost made the Pro Bowl last year. So, I mean, take that as you will. But yeah, I'm excited to watch Puka and Cooper Kupp. I feel like if we're looking at them together, both of them are very, very similar receivers in that their routes that they run are absolutely beautiful. They get open in space and they can also run after the catch. And it's just beautiful to watch. And having two elite route runners like Puka and Cooper on the same team and spreading them out, even if they're both like on the outsides, or you bring in Puka to the slot or even Cooper to the slot, it's going to be so excited to watch. And like secondaries are just going to be like, what do we do?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Because they can both do both. They can play inside, they can play
yeah.
outside, right? And the last time you seen Cooper Kupp with a solid number 2 was Odell Beckham. They won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And even then that season, Cooper Kupp was getting double teamed every single play, you know? So it's just having someone like Puka who you just seen what he did. I mean, it's going to be scary.
Yeah.
But going into the next topic of discussion, obviously today we did want to discuss predicting our AFC playoff teams going into next season, right? And so discussing the AFC playoffs, obviously every year you get about 2 or 3 teams who didn't make the playoffs last year, the year before. So 2 or 3 new teams this year. So I kind of tried to, that's typically the average number you get. So my 7 teams I picked to make the AFC playoffs. Obviously, I put that into account. But starting top to bottom, right? Number 1, I got the Baltimore Ravens. Again, just the Lamar Jackson's one of the winningest quarterbacks in the regular season. Just won a second MVP. You brought in Derrick Henry to devote yourself to running the ball. You still have a high-level defense that everybody's been knocking on this offseason, said it's got worse. I don't think so. I think it's going to be, if still a top 5, the top 8 unit, right? Number 2, you got the Chiefs, right? You finally added a guy like Xavier Worthy to give somebody with a little speed, a deep threat that Patrick Mahomes hasn't had the past couple years since you've lost Tyreek Hill. Right, you still have Rashid Rice, even if he ends up getting suspended. Whenever he does come back, you should still see some solid production from him as a wide receiver 2, a number 2 option. And then you still have Travis Kelce and the greatest quarterback in the NFL at this current moment. Number 3, I do got the Bills. And I know this is a kind of a hot take for the league, right? A lot of people are looking down on Buffalo this year, but listen, last year they still handed it to the Jets. The one time they lost to the Jets, Josh Allen had 5 turnovers, right? You dominated the Miami Dolphins twice this year, who I'm not very high on. I expect them to lose some games. I expect the Jets to lose some games. And then we have the Patriots, who are just an irrelevant team, right? And I expect Josh Allen to be able to win enough games with this team that they have. Brian Thompson Jr., who they just drafted, Keon Coleman, who they just drafted and added to this team, right? I expect big things from this team. You still have, why am I blanking on the running back? That's just right there. Not Jared Cook. What's his name? The running back from Buffalo?
The running back from Buffalo.
Oh, I'm blanking right now. James Cook, thank you. James Cook was an absolute stud the second half of the season, was a very versatile running back for them. I expect them to maintain their position they had this year. Number 4, I got the Jacksonville Jaguars winning the division at number 4. I expect them to win less games than the Buffalo Bills. And the only reason the Houston Texans are not winning the division, the Colts are going to be better with Anthony Richardson. You hope. The Tennessee Titans are no pushover, right? The Texans have one of the toughest schedules this year. You play Dallas in Dallas, you play Kansas City, and you play Cincinnati in Cincinnati, right? So those are a couple tough non-division games that could hurt you in the rankings, right? And then at number 5, I skipped the Texans. I got Texans at 6. Number 5, I got the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals, again, I think they just re-signed T. Higgins to a franchise tag. You're going to be running it back. You still have Jamar Chase at full health after a whole offseason. Joe Burrow at a full healthy offseason. You have devoted yourself to protecting Joe Burrow this upcoming year, right? I expect big things from this team. I mean, Joe Burrow, again, the second best quarterback in NFL in my eyes, and I expect him to go out here and dominate, right? And then at number 6, I got the Jets. I got the Jets over the Dolphins making the playoffs this year. Again, I don't think Aaron Rodgers has to be Aaron Rodgers or even 85% of Aaron Rodgers, I think this team is more than capable of winning games with a B to B minus quarterback. If Aaron Rodgers can go out there and get the ball to Garrett Wilson, get the ball to Breece Hall, and just get these guys involved, I think they're going to be great. You know, they addressed the O-line in the draft this year, spending their first round pick on a tackle, right? How he gets in with Tyron Smith and his health issues, we'll see how that goes. But again, I love this defense. I think this defense is going to be one of the best defenses in the league. I have so much faith in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams to really hold their own this year. And listen, when they lost these games to Miami last year, Miami won by 1 possession each time, and they were playing with XFL quarterback and even Zach Wilson, right, which was 2 of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL last year. So I think if you get a quarterback who can just go out here and produce some sort of numbers and not be a passing liability, this team can make the playoffs and win 9 games, 10 games even, depending on how it pans out. And then number 7, bit biased, but I got the Raiders making it at 7. I think our defense is going to be the key vocal point of our offense, of our team, right? We're going to be a very good defensive team. I expect a top 5 to top 8 defense this year. Max Crosby, I'm praying for a defensive player of the year type year from him, and pairing him alongside Malcolm Coombs, who in the second half of the season had 8 sacks, right? Now you get a full season, off season of where we know what you're capable of. Now you're going to draw some more attention. You just signed Christian Wilkins, who I think is going to be a big addition to this team, and I think personally we're just going to wreak havoc this year. I think
Wilkins is a dog.
exactly, right? And now you get less double teams for Max Crosby. So I expect this team to take a huge defensive leap. You still have Devontae Adams on offense. You have Brock Bowers, who's regarded as one of the best generational tight ends we've ever seen, right? And then you still have Michael Mayer, and he's gonna do it all for you, right? We got him last year. He's still capable of bodying defenders, right? He's a mismatch in the red zone. He's capable of blocking, right? And just having 2 great tight ends, I think, is just a good fit. You've seen a team like New England have so much success in their early years with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. Just that 2 tight end thing just makes me feel good for a quarterback who's kind of forced to play a game manager role. You have 2 guys who can just drop the ball off and let them get some extra yards for you, and then you still have Jacoby Myers, who was one of the best red zone targets in the league last year. So I think this team has the potential to go out there and win, go 9-8, 10-7, depending on how it plays out. But again, this is another situation where you can get B- to B quarterback play, and you could win games. You can make a playoff push. Anything past the first round, I'm not going to speak on because I'm not sure. It's a quarterback-driven league, but I can see us winning 10 or 9 games and making the playoffs at that.
Yeah, there's a lot of young pieces on the Raiders team that I really like Trey Tucker, the rookie from last year. I love Trey Tucker so much.
It's one of my favorite Raiders.
He reminds me of a lot of like a really young Brandon Cooks-ish, kind of like just his style, and he kind of like how the Raiders used him last year, or like his potential kind of reminds me a lot of like Calvin Austin on the Steelers too, and how I want him to be used. I also love Jackson Powers Johnson that the Raiders drafted. I wanted the Steelers to draft him literally so bad. And then I love Robert Spillane too. He's an absolute dog when he was on the Steelers. I wish we would have kept him, but stuff happens. And then who else did I like? I liked Zamir White. I think he's super underrated. I think he did so well. Yeah. Whenever he got like spot starts here and there for the Raiders.
Yeah, the last 3 to 4 games of the year last year, he was averaging almost 6 yards per carry. He had 115 yards in 2 different games. I expect a big jump from him as a running back, as a number 1 option. Yeah. He's the only guy we got, so you gotta figure it out.
So for my 7 teams for the AFC, I've got the 1 seed is going to be the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs will be the 1 seed, obviously. 2, I have the Ravens. I feel like they're always up there. They always do really well in the regular season. They're always a pretty high seed. And I just, even though I hate the Ravens and I hate the AFC North, I feel them and I see them going there. Number 3, I have the Texans. I think they're going to do really well. That offense is absolutely stacked now with Diggs, with Joe Mixon, and then they've added to their defense, which is absolutely stacked already. That secondary, there's just so many young studs on that defense. I just feel like I could even see them making a battle for the 2 and 1 seed. Like I wouldn't be shocked, honestly. It just depends on CJ Stroud and if he takes a sophomore leap or if he gets in a sophomore slump. Number 4, I have the Jets. I actually have the Jets pretty high, and I feel like, I mean, yeah. You'll be shocked. You'll be shocked. So I have the Jets at 4. I feel like Aaron Rodgers is really gonna. Hopefully, this is kind of me bidding on Aaron Rodgers, kind of going back to his form that he was before. I feel like that Jets offense did so well, like Brees Hall and like Garrett Wilson putting up numbers, even though they literally had one of the worst quarterback situations in the league with Zach Wilson. I feel like actually getting Aaron Rodgers back, like that whole aura that the team had before Aaron Rodgers got hurt, like the Sauce Gardner, Aaron Rodgers being best friends, and the whole like just that aura that they had like on social media and like just the excitement leading up to it. I was excited for the Jets last year until Rodgers towards Achilles. It was over after that. And they still sometimes, they kept competitive in some games because that defense is literally so good and so young. But yeah, it'll be exciting to watch them. Number 5, I have the Steelers. Obviously, this is kind of, I want to say it's biased, but at the same time, I mean, the Steelers just, they're one of those teams where like they just win. They'll stay over 500. Tomlin, I mean, they haven't gotten any worse than they did last year. They've gotten better, obviously.
Right.
The huge like the huge problems that they had with their offensive line, and then obviously quarterback. They obviously brought in Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, which we'll see how that pans out. But their offense, I mean, their first round pick was an offensive tackle. And then they drafted another offensive tackle after that, or an offensive guard, and then they drafted a center in the second round too. So they definitely
Address that.
They added to that offensive line. Yeah. So those were the two glaring questions, and then it was kind of like the secondary. In specific, the corners, our safeties are kind of okay. Obviously, we have Minka, probably top 3 safety in the NFL. Me personally, I think he's number 1. A lot of people like Derwin. A lot of people like Jesse Bates. But the corners, I mean, they were kind of dookie. Not gonna lie. They're not even coming to my. They're not even coming to my mind right now before Joey Porter, because apparently Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin have this thing where they hate starting and playing their first round picks until like they actually see some actual production from them, which Broderick Jones, who's like, going to be, I feel like he'll be a superstar offensive tackle for the Steelers. He didn't even start starting until like week 7 or 8, like in the middle of the season. Same thing with Joey Porter Jr. He'd get snaps in there and he'd get like an interception. Like he had a huge, like, interception against Lamar Jackson to win the game when the Steelers and Ravens played. And then after that game was finally the first time where they were like, okay, JPJ is going to be the number 1 corner. He's going to start now. Like he's not just going to, we're not going to start him and then we'll trot him out in the middle of the field for him to get snaps. So I feel like the Steelers addressed the needs that they had. The one glaring need is obviously that wide receiver 2 besides George Pickens. They literally have nobody. So they have Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Kez Watkins,
Brance Jefferson,
whoever else they have. Yeah. So we'll see. Tight end, they have Pat Freiermuth. He's pretty solid. I think he's above average. He did so well with Big Ben. Then they brought in Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett couldn't really get the ball to anybody besides George Pickens on, over the shoulder throws. But so I have the Steelers at 5 just because of their history of just winning games, and I feel like they haven't gotten worse. So, why would they be worse in the standings? The Bengals at 6, I feel like I feel like the Bengals are going to make the playoffs. They're going to have Joe Burrow back, obviously. I feel like the Ravens win that division. I think the Steelers always have a leg up on the Bengals, and obviously they poop on the Browns almost every time they play them. And I know a lot of people want to say the Browns are going to make the playoffs, and I feel like every single year, it's always the Browns are going to be good this year. The Browns are going to be good this year. The Browns are going to be good this year. All the way from the first initial time when they signed Odell Beckham Jr. I remember when they signed Odell his first year in Cleveland, everyone was literally so hyped for this team. And then also like when they beat the Steelers in the playoffs, where like they beat us in like the wild card game or something, where Marquise literally like the first play of the game chucked it over Big Ben's head like 20 yards. And it was like, yeah, I knew that was just a disaster. But yeah, so I have the Bengals making it. Number 7 is going to shock a lot of people. I don't have the Bills. Making the playoffs. Number 7, I have the Colts.
Okay. I'm not even mad at that.
Yeah. So number 7, I have the Colts. I just really like the Colts team. I also really like Anthony Richardson. He showed a lot of flashes, like in his rookie year before he got hurt and kind of got shut down for the rest of the season. But if you look at their depth chart, they've obviously got one of the best running backs in the NFL in Jonathan Taylor. They've got Michael Pittman Jr., who is, I'd say on the lower end of wide receiver ones, but he's going to solid. Give you 1,000 yards every season. He's absolutely solid. They've got an enormous tight end in Jelani Woods, who's an absolute just like unit. He reminds me of Darnell Washington on the Steelers. They just drafted Adonai Mitchell, who's a dog out of Texas
Texas.
in the second round. They've got Josh Downs, who's pretty decent too, who came out of UNC in the third round last year. They've also got Alec Pierce, who's kind of showed, some strides here and there. But, I wouldn't be too worried. They have their wide receiver one in Michael Pittman Jr. And then the complementary pieces after that, I wouldn't be too worried about. They've got an amazing offensive line headed by Quentin Nelson, who to me is, I would say he's the best offensive lineman in the league. I'd rather have
he's been a
Quentin
dog
Nelson
since he's came in.
Yeah. And then they have Ryan Kelly, who was also a Pro Bowler at center last year. And then on that defense, they have Kwity Paye, who's pretty decent. The defense is what's going to be the sus part. I mean, they don't have anybody on that defense that like you look at and you're like, wow, that guy sticks out to me. They have DeForest Buckner, they have Zaire Franklin. Obviously, they don't have Shaq Leonard anymore. That was their their big name guy was Darius Leonard. And then you look at the defense and it's like there's really no one there. Like there's really no one.
They just drafted a dude at UCLA.
Yeah,
Latu.
Yeah.
Latu.
Yeah. So hopefully he does well. But like I said, I mean that's their secondary is awful to say the least. I mean, Kenny Moore is decent.
He's a dog.
Yeah,
no, he's a dog. He's a dog.
Julius Brents. They've got Julius Brents. They've got Jalen Jones, Nick Cross, Julian Blackman. I mean, like, do any of those names kind of like stretch out to you and be like, once they get to the playoffs, I think they'll be able to hold Devontae Adams or any of those guys down. I don't really think so. Kenny Moore is really good. He is pretty decent. He had a few interceptions last year, but yeah, I have them squeaking it out. I have them making the playoffs. I feel like there will be a couple of games where they'll play the role of kind of like beating like a bigger team like the Bills. Like shockingly, I feel like they'll just squeak out a win. And like with Anthony Richardson, this is all kind of depending on how Anthony Richardson does, obviously in his sophomore season. But if I was going to switch the Colts out with someone, I still wouldn't even put the Bills there. I think I would rather put the Dolphins there, if I'm being honest.
Dolphins ain't making it.
I just feel like that Bills team is just they just got absolutely gutted. I mean, like their defense just got absolutely gutted when they had to cut like they lost like Jordan Poyer and like Tre'Davious White and like just a lot of that like secondary that kind of like held them together. I mean, obviously they still have Ed Oliver. I mean, they still have Von Miller, I guess, but he's kind of on the downward slope of his career. They have Ed Oliver, who's really good. Greg Rousseau's kind of growing into his own. Terrell Bernard, who's a Baylor alum, who's an absolute dog in the middle of the field. Same thing with Matt Milano, who's an absolute dog. So their linebacker core is great. I just feel like their secondary with like Taylor Rapp, Razul Douglas. I don't even know who their other corner is. Maybe like I think their safety is. I think they have like Cole Bishop and someone else in their secondary. But yeah, I mean it's just going to be hard to like compete with like a secondary that bad. Also, just like I feel like their superstar, who's you're going to look at their defense and you're going to be like they have Von Miller, and I mean. Vaughn didn't play last year.
If you can get after the quarterback a decent amount, you should be fine enough to win games. But again, this is going to be a year where it's Josh Allen. You need to be Josh Allen. You need to be regarded.
Yeah, and the hard thing too, it's going to be for Josh is that he lost Diggs, he lost his number one guy. But I'm actually looking at this team. I mean, I'm kind of excited about the pieces that they have around. Khalil Shakir is one of the high. Like I'm so high on Khalil Shakir. I love Khalil Shakir so much. I would not be shocked at all if he has 1,200 yards receiving. I wouldn't be shocked. Like I literally love Khalil Shakir. Also James Cook. He's going to be really good this year. Their offensive line is pretty. It's above average. It's not bad. They got Chase Claypool. Apparently Chase Claypool is getting a lot of hype in training camp. We'll see. I mean. We'll see what happens there. But I mean, with a gunslinger like Josh Allen and a guy that literally can only go deep and like catch verticals like Chase Claypool, we'll see. I mean, if he starts high pointing balls and he goes back to like the whole Big Ben Chase Claypool rookie year, like 800 yards, 10 touchdowns, whatever, like 3 touchdowns in one game, that Chase Claypool, then I mean, they're going to be okay, and they have Dalton Kincaid too. So and Dawson Knox as well, which I mean they have that two tight end core there. That's it's pretty decent. So, but I mean, like just if the Colts didn't make it, I just say the Dolphins just because of their offensive firepower with Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Devin Achane, Mostert, and then I mean Tua at quarterback. But like I mean like they do win games in the regular season, but we'll see because I mean I don't know like I haven't looked at like the schedule strengths, but I know the Dolphins literally didn't play anyone good last year during the
And they
regular
were still
season, and then
0-2 versus the
they
Bills.
literally yeah, exactly. And so
Got
they
slammed.
literally lost in the games that it actually counted. But it'll be interesting just seeing like Bills Dolphins. I'm leaning towards Dolphins just because of like how much the Bills have lost. But I mean, if Josh Allen proves that he's the QB and they make the playoffs this year, I would give a lot of credit to Josh Allen.
Yeah, sure, and I agree. It's going to be a very like a Josh Allen top three quarterback in the NFL this year. Like you cannot have that roller coaster of a ride you had last year, where you started losing 4 games in a row, and then you guys have to win 6 out of the next 7 to make the play. You know all that stuff. You that has to go out the window. You got to be better. You got a lot of young guys, so we'll see how that pans out. But talking about the Colts situation, I absolutely love that pick. I mean, because talking about it, they had one game. They beat the Ravens last year. They had them their first loss of the season, won in
Yeah.
overtime. You lost to the Rams, who another playoff team, who you lost to them in an overtime punt return touchdown, right? Which just never happens, right? Just never happens. And then when you talk about the whole Anthony Richardson dilemma, right? Him, I understand he's shown a lot of flashes. You need him to stay healthy, which I mean, 3 injuries last in the first 3 weeks that we've seen him is questionable, right? But again, we're hoping for a healthy Anthony Richardson this year. You have a great O-line, but I think the whole like I know these like the Alex Pierce, the Michael Pittman, these young guys who they're not, eye-popping best receiver in the league type stuff, but the numbers they put up with Gardner Minshew last year, I think is a good good thing if you're an Indianapolis Colts fan going forward, because you get a guy like Anthony Richardson who can kind of throw the ball, make any type of throw, make most throws, has a very, very strong arm, which I think will benefit Michael Pittman, Alex Pierce, and these younger guys. But the whole dilemma with Jonathan Taylor, I mean, I think that could just be a very, very scary duo. You know what I'm saying? You have a athletic QB like Anthony Richardson and a dominant running back like Jonathan Taylor behind one of the best O-lines in football. Like this team, it can be very, very scary, right? Very young, very fast, very quick, and very dynamic if everything is put together well. Again, the defense is a bit of an issue, but we also seen them even with those 2 games. The game they lost to the Rams, which could have been crucial down the line, but they were one drop pass away from making the playoffs, from beating the Texans with Gardner Minshew, you know what I'm saying, and all that stuff. And we still have yet to see Anthony Richardson play with Jonathan Taylor, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And if they did in week 3, I think it was very, very little, because it was Jonathan Taylor's first game in action. But so, again, I think very highly of the Colts. I just don't know how quickly Anthony Richardson's going to put it together. Like, is he going to have turnover issues? Is he going to get banged up again? Are we going to have to change his playing style? All these questions definitely matter. And not having a guy like Gardner Minshew, who he's just a seasoned veteran. He's seen it all. He's been everywhere, So it could hurt you if Anthony Richardson ends up getting hurt. But again, I completely agree with that take at 7. And then to finish off the show today, the episode for today, we did want to discuss the NFL awards for next year. And I'll let Seth start it off.
Yeah, so if we're talking MVP, first off for MVP, we can go one by one and just give our picks for each award. For MVP, for me, I don't want to pick, Mahomes. It's kind of boring. I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins.
I like that.
And I feel like I'm really, really high on the Falcons. Sort of like whenever maybe on the next session when we talk about like hot takes that we have or whatever, I actually have the Falcons making the NFC Championship. I don't have them making the Super Bowl, but I think that offense is going to be literally so fun to watch with Bijan and Kyle Pitts. Obviously, I think Kyle Pitts will finally show us kind of the potential behind Kyle Pitts. With a new offensive coordinator and, so many weapons around. Kirk Cousins is going to have Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Rondell Moore now. And then they also have a gadget guy in Ray McLeod too, who I loved when he was on the Steelers. And then he went to the Niners and had a few, pretty good plays down there too. But they have a really, really good, they have an above average offensive line. Kirk
I don't
Cousins
know.
coming back.
I think Atlanta's offensive line is a little underappreciated. I think it's really really good. If you watch them play,
Yeah,
like
I agree. And then the defense headed by their secondary is really, really good. They have Jesse Bates, obviously. They have AJ Terrell, who's an absolute dog. They've got Grady Jarrett on the line. They've got Troy Anderson is pretty decent in the middle. They've got Lorenzo Carter too. I feel like that linebacker core is going to be a little sus during the year, maybe. And then their number 2 corner, Clark Phillips too. He's kind of a little sus spot on that, but I can definitely see them making a run for it, especially with a lot of their defensive guys too. A lot of them were draft picks last year and the year before, so they're all younger. So even if one of them kind of takes that step and like breaks out, it'll be a pretty good season to watch. The only thing is, man, I wish they did not draft Michael Penix, man. I wish they took that first round pick, and I wish they drafted somebody that they needed
Dallas
right
Turner.
now, because Dallas Turner was the guy that I wanted them to draft so bad, because if they brought in Dallas Turner, that would give them another edge rusher, and that would kind of, solidify that defense and bring them into take the step up. And I get the whole kind of like if Kirk Cousins, like they bring Kirk Cousins on a big contract, but if he doesn't produce, they still have a guy to put in there to be competitive or whatever, right? But I mean, they have Taylor Heineke. They didn't do Taylor Heineke. He's not great at all whatsoever, but he's not bad. He's kind
Underappreciated.
of those mid guys. Yeah, I think he's pretty underappreciated. He had that huge
He won a
that
playoff game with, or he almost won a playoff game with the
Cinderella
Commanders.
thing with the Commanders, and yeah, that was pretty cool. But I mean, man, I mean, we'll see. Michael Penix is older too. I mean, if he sits a season or two, the guy's already 24 years old. He's already in a Kenny Pickett situation. You know what I mean? Kenny Pickett's 25. He was drafted when he was 24. Michael Penix is already 24. You think the Falcons are going to wait for him to develop while he's already 24 and they have all these weapons around him? I mean, I really wish they took Dallas Turner, but even though their defense is sus, I still am so high on Kirk Cousins. I feel like he's going to, when we talk about numbers and stats, he is going to put up an insane amount of numbers and an insane amount of stats. And I haven't looked at their strength of schedule or anything, but I highly doubt that they have a really.
It's not good.
Okay, yeah.
Bottom,
I was going to
10.
say
Bottom 10.
I think. Okay, so but I mean, with like a backfield with Bijan and then Tyler Algier, who literally, I mean, Tyler Algier had
So
a
good.
1,000-yard
So
season.
good.
Like he had a 1,000-yard season his rookie season, right? And then they drafted Bijan, and I was like, that was when people were like, why'd you draft Bijan, Tyler Algier? Bijan top 10, like a running back top 10, and you already had a running back that just ran for 1,000. But I mean, I like it. I mean, Bijan's just Bijan. He's great. So Kirk Cousins is going to put up numbers, absolute numbers. And if it's not Kirk Cousins, even when you were talking about it, I could see Bijan winning MVP. Like one of those guys is going to put up an insane, just an insane stat line if they stay healthy.
Yeah, and I 100% agree that, I agree Bijan is going to play a big role this upcoming year. Obviously, Tyler Algier, again, a great complimentary back to Bijan and everything he can do. But again, I am very high on Michael Penix as well, although I know they wasted a draft pick and all that stuff. But I still think, again, like you said, Kirk Cousins is more than capable of producing. He's going to get the guys the ball. Drake London's finally going to have a quarterback who can get him the ball. Kyle Pitts, this team's going to take full form. But one of my dark horses MVPs is, like you said, is Bijan Robinson. I know it's a quarterback one award, especially in recent history, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have a guy come out here and go for maybe 1,200 rushing yards and 600 passing yards, close to that 1,900, 2,000 yard all-purpose yard mark. I really think he has the potential to do that. And what I seen from him last year, even though he missed a couple games due to sickness, migraines, whatever injury, I did like what I seen from him. And I think the fact that, he plays in such a weak division, a weaker conference. I think the schedule is going to be perfect. It's going to benefit towards him. They've already discussed with the new OC, they want to get Bijan more involved out the pass game, which is going to allow him to do a lot of things. Because if you didn't watch Bijan last year, one thing that you couldn't do is you couldn't touch him. Right, he was just such a hard guy to come up and tackle. And pairing him up with a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's more than well aware to hit the running back, hit a check down, get him set up, and then you have a guy like Tyler Algier who can run the ball, be that hard nosed running back, and then allow Bijan to do all the finesse stuff. It's just great. It's a great pairing. This team, it's ready and it's destined. It's built up for a breakout year. This team together, if they don't win the division, I'll be a little disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. I think this is the moment to go out and go get it. Go get it. Go push for the playoffs. But again, if it's not Bijan Robinson, I do think I try to find myself not a name that's brought up all the time, but I got Joe Burrow. I mean, I just think a full healthy offseason, you still got Jamar Chase who's going to be healthy. You're bringing back T. Higgins. You don't have Joe Mixon anymore, right? So we're going to have to figure that out. But all Joe Burrow does is win games and he puts up numbers, right? And we need to see more from Jamar Chase again. So we need to see more from T. Higgins. He's playing on a contract year, So I expect a great season offensively. A lot of stuff is going to play through him. He's going to be forced to throw the ball a lot more, right? He does play in a tough division, but I think coming out there, making the playoffs, winning double-digit games, throwing for 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns. I expect that type of year from Joe Burrow. And for him just to absolutely dominate this year, because they have the most to prove, I feel like, to stamp their name in the playoffs and make a deep playoff run. But then we get into Offensive Player of the Year. I'll go first. Offensive Player of the Year for me, again, like I previously discussed, is going to be Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson, for all the reasons I just discussed. I mean, there's no reason. I wanted to put him at MVP so bad, but again, it is a quarterback-driven league, quarterback-driven reward this last 20 years. But I do expect a phenomenal and absolute monster year from Bijan Robinson this year.
Yeah, I mean, I also have Bijan too if he doesn't win MVP, but another pick that's not Bijan that I could see. There's two. One dark horse that I have is Amon-Ra, and I feel like he's going to take another jump this year with the Lions. And I feel like he just produced some pretty crazy numbers last year, even when he was hurt. I read like a news story or something that he literally like tore something during the season and
his
was
abdominal.
still playing.
His abdominal.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. And so I think if he's fully healthy in the Lions, just continue to be the Lions and just that offense. And that was their first kind of like all those young guys. That was like their first year kind of meshing together and they went pretty far. So I feel like they're gonna do really well. So Amon-Ra is kind of my dark horse, but the other guy that I want to say that I think might win Offensive Player of the Year is Saquon. With the Eagles, and I love Saquon. I feel like that Eagles just offensive line is ridiculous. They're really really good. The only thing that I would think that kind of like takes away from this pick of Saquon he has an actual quarterback now too. I mean, like Daniel Jones, he really hasn't had a real quarterback. But with Jalen Hurts there. I know that Jalen Hurts is a run. He's kind of he gets his numbers on the ground. And when it comes to the goal line, the tush push and whatever stuff like that, we'll see if they start actually utilizing their running back more because it's Saquon rather than DeAndre Swift, which DeAndre Swift did really, really well. He had a few crazy games. But then you'd see like kind of Jalen Hurts taking over that run game and kind of focusing on him. But I mean, with the amount of money that they paid Saquon and, just Saquon's caliber, I feel like that passing game is going to open up the run game so much for Saquon. And he's never really had that in his career yet because no one's really been scared of the Giants throwing the ball with Daniel Jones and having receivers like Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard and all those guys. So, I mean, actually having a passing game to help him open up the run game and to be able to maybe get one-on-one in space with like linebackers or things like that, instead of people just stacking the box whenever he's running too. It's going to be pretty exciting to watch, especially like just watching him catch passes out of the backfield from Jalen Hurts. And I know for a fact that Eagles offense is going to kind of bring in packages where they're going to have Jalen Hurts and Saquon, and there's going to be option plays and stuff like that. So it's going to be really exciting to watch. So I'll have, if it's not Bijan, I'll pick Saquon as my Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, and another guy I just want to discuss in the same type of situation is Derrick Henry, right? Derrick Henry, you put him alongside Lamar Jackson, a guy who can run the ball on his own, right? So then you have a great O-line. You're one of the best run offenses in the league. You are able to be the number one rush offense in the league with Gus Edwards and, J.K. Dobbins, who only played 3 games a year. And, you were very, very thin at that running back group, but you still produced. You had Justice Edwards, I believe his name was, before he tore his ACL, looked like an all-pro player, So this team can run the ball with anybody, and pairing him with Derrick Henry is just, to me, just absolute cheat code. I wouldn't be surprised if Derrick Henry goes out here and rushes for 2,000 yards. I really wouldn't, right? And then you put him in that kind of MVP discussion if he would do something like that again. But I expect a big, huge year for Derrick Henry running the ball this year. But then the next award is obviously going to be the Defensive Player of the Year. I'll start this one off. Defensive Player of the Year, I do got Max Crosby finally making that type of leap, right? He's had the numbers and the stats to do it, but defensively, we haven't been a top five defense, and our winning percentage hasn't been that great. We haven't got enough wins, got a little disrespected. But I do think with the addition of Christian Wilkins, an all pro caliber D tackle, he's a very great D tackle. We paid him all this money to come in here and be a menace, pairing him alongside Max Crosby. We still have our first round pick last year, Tyree Wilson, who now has a whole offseason to get healthy. He's been training with Max Crosby. He's been locking in. You have a whole nother year of development, a whole another offseason, right? And then you pair him also with Malcolm Kunks to join the rotation, who Kunks, if you don't know who he is, if you're not familiar with his name, that second half of the season, he had the most sacks through week 13 to 18, I believe. He ended up with 8.5 or 9 to finish the season, specifically with 3 against Patrick Mahomes on Christmas Day, right? So he really flourished and came out of his shell the second half of the season, and I expect him a full off season now that we know what he's capable of. He's been training with Max Crosby again, really buying into this defense and this pass rush. I expect a big year from Malcolm Kunks, which just overall in general gives Max Crosby more one-on-one opportunities, and I promise you this, one-on-one opportunities with Max Crosby, there's not many people who are going to stop him from disrupting everything on that offense.
Yeah. For me, I completely respect that pick. I completely understand it. I can 100% see that happening. For me, obviously as a Steelers fan, I want to pick TJ Watt. I know the league's pretty biased when it comes to TJ Watt. I'm actually not going to pick TJ Watt. I'm actually going to pick, for my defensive player of the year, I have Micah Parsons winning it. Okay. I feel like every year since TJ Watt has gotten so dominant, I feel like every year it's always the numbers say it's TJ Watt, the kind of the thing. And then you have PFF and all these other things and other people thinking that oh, it's Myles Garrett. So for me, Myles Garrett last year, he did not have the production numbers, the actual sack total and everything to win defensive player of the year, right? That was I feel like the league felt that it owed Myles Garrett a defensive player of the year award. And I felt like it was more so hearsay, more so, oh, it looks like Myles Garrett impacts the game at a higher level than TJ Watt, even if his numbers don't produce it, right? Or don't show it, right? Which I literally saw Myles Garrett moving around the line of scrimmage and then them audibling wherever Myles Garrett went, right? Which is a pretty big deal, right? But numbers are numbers, right? And if we look at Myles Garrett's last 10 games, 5 to 6 games of the season, it was a 2-month span of where he had 1 sack in 2 months, which is pretty crazy. In 4 or 5 games, he only had 1 sack, which if you're a defensive player of the year, I'm sorry, but TJ Watt also gets double and triple team. Are you kidding me? It's not offensive lines are oh, Myles Garrett, we're double teaming. TJ Watt, we'll double team him sometimes. We're not going to double. No, TJ Watt also got double team too. And then you have people arguing about who gets double team more, who gets triple team more, who blah, 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 all this stuff. It's just dumb. For me, Micah Parsons was great last year. Towards the beginning of the season, I think he was an absolute animal. I think he fell off towards the end, but I feel like it's going to come down to, again, one of those things where the league is going to feel like it owes Micah Parsons a defensive player of the year. He's been in the contention and kind of the conversation the past couple or few years, past couple years. And I feel like if he puts up numbers even maybe close to TJ Watt, maybe if he's 2 sacks, 3 sacks less than TJ Watt, I can see him winning it. And then for me, another name I want to throw out there too, just for fun, Aiden Hutchinson. I want to throw out Aiden Hutchinson in there because he's super young. He had 11 and a half sacks, 11 and a half, 12, somewhere around there last year. The Lions did so well. They're going to do really well next year too. And he's just an exciting player to watch. He has the whole city of Detroit behind him, kind of that whole, a lot of the awards that come out for hey, I want this guy to win an award, or hey, he's the favorite to win that award. A majority of it comes from teams that kind of come from the bottom of the barrel, but they get better. And then while they get better, those guys get more publicity and they get more hype around their name. So guys like Aiden Hutchinson, or guys if the Raiders produce this year, Max Crosby too. That's another, they will come up, their names will start being mentioned and they'll start also being favorites too. But I know there's a lot of guys too that could, Like Nick Bosa too could be another name out there, but like he's kind of hidden behind just like he's another one of those elite guys on the Niners defense. You know what I mean? Like when you think of the Niners defense, you think of Fred Warner. That's the first guy that actually comes to mind for me.
100%.
Hufanga, he's coming back from a a season-ending injury, but like he's not thought of as that one guy on the defense that's going to be the difference maker because they have another superstar on their team in Fred Warner, right? So I don't think Nick Bosa will win it. If we're thinking of other guys that maybe win it, Will Anderson kind of ish. A lot of guys really like him. I mean, he obviously won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Maybe he makes a jump. I don't think he would win it over Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, Max Crosby, any of those guys. Danielle Hunter, obviously, too. He was pretty high in the stat category for sacks, but then again, like, you know, he's not one of those guys that like he seems exciting. No, he's one of those guys that he gets the sacks, he gets the cleanup sacks, and it's nothing flashy. But yeah, for defensive player of the year, I have Micah Parsons.
Yeah, and like you said, 100%. Your team's success definitely has something to do with it. You know, Aiden Hutchinson, I like that pick, especially the way that the Lions have been performing and that team being so young. You know, they're kind of in that Super Bowl or tier, you know what I'm saying, contender tier. So I actually love those picks. But the last two awards I did want to discuss was Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year. For Offensive Rookie of the Year, for me, I do got Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams, which might shock some people. I just think Jaden Daniels is more NFL ready when it comes to throwing on time, you know, throwing with anticipation, throwing his guys open, right? And I know Caleb Williams, the last year of college, he's played with that god-awful team at USC. I watched every game of the week. You know, I know how bad that defense was, how bad that receiving core was, how terrible that O-line was. It was very god-awful last year for Caleb Williams, which I think kind of built all these bad habits of throwing off time, off schedule, and having to create for yourself. But I think Jaden Daniels with his ability to run, having Terry McLaurin, you know, you have Austin Eckler, you still got Jahan Dotson. I just think he's going to be more well ready to win now, or just succeed at now right off the bat.
Yeah, that's so funny because I literally exact same take. I think Jaden Daniels is going to win it for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I also think too we're going to take into account that Jaden Daniels is obviously going to have a lot of people to kind of like. He needs to produce, obviously, he was the number 2 pick?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, people are going to want to see him produce. And he's going to have pressure on his shoulders, but the pressure on his shoulders is going to be nothing compared to Caleb Williams.
Right.
I feel like, and people are expecting Caleb to come in here and maybe throw for like 4,000 yards, dude.
They really
like,
are.
The way he talks, the way he talks, the way he kind of demands stuff, the way he's kind of gone about it, and everyone's hyped him up. Yeah, he needs to throw for 4,000 yards, and the Bears need to make the playoffs. Like, the Bears not making the playoffs this year, I feel like it's just a loss. I mean, with Caleb Williams has one of the most stacked offensives in the league now, with Keenan Allen, with DJ Moore, with Rome,
Swift,
and then DeAndre Swift. Like, it's not like he's going into a situation like poor Bryce Young, right? It's not like he's going into a situation like that. So, but I think Jaden, he's going into a really good situation too with Austin Eckler, right? You're going in with Austin Eckler as your running back. You're going in with Terry as your wide receiver 1. You're going in. They have Zach Ertz now at tight end, right? Who not a lot of people are talking about at that addition, but it's a great addition. Jahan Dotson, who I think has shown flashes before. They just need to figure out how to get him the ball. I think Jahan Dotson is pretty good. They just got Luke McCaffrey too. We'll see. I mean, actually, I know, it's not a but what's his name? Zacchaeus, I think he's underrated too. They have Jamison Crowder as well. That offensive line, not good. I'm going to be honest. The offensive line scares me. Obviously, they gave up a league high, like 60 something sacks to Sam Howell last year, that's going to be a little scary. I don't know if they've addressed it or not. I will be completely honest. I have no idea.
I doubt that they have. They probably did some like veteran minimum contract like pieces to bring in and try to make it work. But I definitely think they're relying a lot on, because Cliff Kingsbury is now the OC there, right? And a lot of his stuff with Kyler Murray and at USC and even Texas Tech was to get his quarterback outside of the pocket. So I think that's how they're
Mhm.
going to address the O-line issues, the O-line deficiencies, is just allow Jaden Daniels to get outside the pocket, allow him to use his legs to create for himself and be very mobile. And you'll see a lot of stuff on the run this year, I'm sure. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury's done that everywhere he's gone. You also seen a lot of success with Kyler Murray early on in his career, so I think they'll be fine on the offensive line. It'll still be bad, don't get me wrong, but league like 66 sacks, I think you just said, whatever, 60 something
Yeah,
sacks.
some crazy number like
Yeah,
that.
like
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna be that bad due to Jaden Daniels' ability to run.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I think too that kind of like one up on Caleb. A lot of like the guys that you see that win Offensive Rookie of the Year that are quarterbacks. They have those exciting run plays as quarterbacks. They have like RG3, that one rushing touchdown against the Vikings that he had that was absolute like pandemonium. CJ Stroud was just CJ Stroud. I mean, he's just indifferent. He was just
Yeah,
an
I'd say he was
absolute mess.
different.
There was no one like it was just him the whole time. But with Caleb, there's going to be a lot of he needs to do this. He needs to be this good. With Jaden Daniels, it's also going to be kind of the same, but he's not going to have that high of expectations. Also, if you look at the defensives too, right? If I'm comparing the Bears defense to the Commanders defense is stacked. They just got Bobby Wagner. Obviously, Bobby Wagner's getting older, right? But he's still producing he's still producing great. They got
Great
Jeremy
bet.
Chin. They have Darren Payne, who's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. They've got Jonathan Allen, who's another one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. They've got Benjamin St-Juste, who I think is incredibly underrated. They've got Emmanuel Forbes, who a lot of people like during training camp are kind of questioning about like his weight and like how skinny he looks and stuff like that, which I mean, he's not one of those guys that has been known to tackle or come up and help in the run game.
But
So,
he's
I
just
mean, I
got.
don't think
Sorry to cut you off. He's got bodied by physical receivers. Like he
yeah,
just got pushed around and stuff like that. So I
yeah.
don't know. We'll see how that goes.
And then they also have Jamin Davis, who they drafted in the first round in 2021 on that defense. And they have Forbes, who I think will step into his game this coming season and be a lot better than he was last season. So their defense is there, I mean, to compete. And obviously, like they need to compete and they need to win some games for him to be able to win Rookie of the Year. And I mean, the Bears defenses, they've got, I know they have,
Jalen Johnson, Montez
yeah,
Sweat.
Jalen Johnson. Montez Sweat. I know there's another guy that I really, really love on the Baylor's defense. Or sorry, the Bears defense. Jaquan Brisker. I really love Jaquan Brisker. Jack Sanborn is They have Tremaine Edmonds, who's pretty decent too. The only thing is like outside of Montez Sweat, kind of like their defensive tackles and their ends aren't really there. They have I don't even know who they have actually at their D tackle
I
and their
believe
other
they
end
drafted
besides
somebody.
Montez
No.
Sweat.
Oh, they drafted Roma Duse. That's right. They went all offense.
Yeah, they drafted Rome. Yeah, they went all offense. And then I know they have in their secondary they have Jalen Johnson, they have Jaquan Brisker. They also have Kevin Byard, but Kevin Byard hasn't really been the same Kevin Byard when he was on the Titans.
He's a
So
good veteran presence, though. You know what I'm saying? To come help a young team.
yeah.
Yeah, but then when we start talking about Defensive Rookie of the Year, the last award for today, Defensive Rookie of the Year, I am very high on Quinion Mitchell. And the reason I say him for Defensive Rookie of the Year is due to the fact that it's either going to be him or Cooper DeJean in my POV, in my eyes, right? Just because how badly they need a cornerback to step up there and make an impact. And I think whichever one of those guys is ready day one, straight out of training camp as a rookie, is going to have the biggest impact on a team, because we see how god awful the secondary was last year, right? You're bringing in a new DC, right? You invested 2 first round caliber cornerbacks into this defense, right? And Quinion Mitchell, I think, is going to be absolutely phenomenal. I've heard a lot of big things about him at training camps, especially his mentality as a player. And just, I mean, working with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, some great receivers to have as your practice partners and to get better and work on your game, right? So I think he could have I'm not saying he's as good, but a Sauce Gardner-like impact, like his first year on the team. He's going to be out there. He's going to be a reliable corner. And for a team like that, like the Eagles, how bad they were last year in the secondary, for a rookie to come in and make a impact, and for them to go from a bottom 30 defense to a 15 or a 10 respectable defense, I think that would get the most nod for Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, for me, I love Kenyon Mitchell. I think if it's going to be a secondary guy, I think it would be him. I think it will probably be an edge, if I'm being honest.
Right. I feel like that too.
Yeah, like a Jared versus Dallas Turner, sort of, even a Latu, who was the first defensive player off the board to the Colts. If it's going to be one of them three, um, I think it'll probably end up being one of them three. But if it is a guy in the secondary, I think it would be Mitchell or Terrion Arnold from the Lions.
Yeah. If I had to assume any edge rusher was going to come in and produce day one, I got to go with the Alabama guy. So I'm going to say Dallas Turner just because
Yeah.
I mean, Will Anderson just did it. You know what I'm saying? And defensively, Alabama's got their name written all over half of the people in the league. Right.
Mhm.
So, yeah, definitely, I agree with you that a edge rusher typically gets the nod or should get the nod. So, yeah, I'm very high on Dallas Turner, though, as a rookie.
It's easier to show like the production and the numbers as an edge rusher with like sacks or like
Right.
forced fumbles rather than like if you're a corner and you're playing lockdown but no one's throwing you the ball and you don't get those interception numbers or pass breakups. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, that's why like Sauce Connor's year was just so ideal because they did try to test him early in his career. He went against the schedule of the receivers he went against and stuff like that. So, yeah, I 100% agree. But with that being said, that was the last discussion of the day. Um and yeah, again, I want to appreciate you for coming out. Appreciate you for spending your time and being on here with me. If you're watching this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to like and follow the show. Give it a 5-star rating. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications. And if you enjoy the content, make sure to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell a friend. Appreciate that. Have a good one.